Chapter 1360. With a lazy fellow that it could not outrun, it could not beat, it could not chase away, and it even tried to snatch food from it, Tunton felt that there was nothing left to live for, and its life was filled with darkness and gloom. Tunton had not felt so sullen even when it was pitting wits, courage, and shamelessness against Shi Tianhao. At the very least, Shi Tianhao would not stare at it all day long. Instead, it was Tunton who stared at Shi Tianhao and took the opportunity to snatch his food. Outside the desolate Heaven Valley, Shi Tianhao and Jie Yu were gloating, while Zhu Yi and White Light shook their heads. Shi Tianhao sighed with a smile. He didn't go to the mysterious Heaven Treasure Tree directly, but returned to the desolate Heaven Valley to rescue Tunton from its demonic hands. Tunton was so moved that it was on the verge of tears. It hugged Shi Tianhao and shouted, "I'll never steal and eat the things you hide in the future. Wait, I'll only steal half, I won't take more." Shi Tianhao rolled his eyes. It's hard to change a leopard's skin. Shi Tianhao was also a little troubled by the addition of another glutton in his desolate Heaven Valley. In the past, he had to guard against fire, theft, and taotai, but now he had to guard against a panda. He originally wanted to move all the pandas in that dimensional realm back, but now it seemed that he had to consider this issue carefully. Although Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao didn't deliberately announce it, the news of Xianmen Tianzong's battle with the dragon race in the void battlefield still spread in the divine land. After Zhu Yi, another one of the four heroes of the celestial sect, Huang Tian Emperor Shi Tianhao, also successfully broke through the bottleneck and cultivated his spirit to return to the void, achieving the return to void stage. This instantly caused another wave in the great Heaven Yuan world. Not long after, there was news that before Shi Tianhao, extreme heavenly exalted Wang Lin had already reached the void returning realm. Xianmen Tianzong's strength became stronger and stronger. What caught everyone's attention the most was still the fact that the mysterious Gates sect master, Lin Feng, had injured the Yuan Dragon King, who was surrounded by the water of the mysterious sea, with a single sword strike across the void battlefield. The sharpness of the sword of execution once again shocked the crowd. Everyone was shocked and their hearts were heavy. They were now even more aware of how powerful Lin Feng's techniques were. The great Qin dynasty's royal son monarch Shi Zhongmao, Xianmen Tianzong, Zhu Yi, and Shi Tianhao had entered the void battlefield together. Most of the top figures in the divine land knew why. After all, the immortal dragon city's existence was of great significance to the great Qin dynasty. In fact, to a certain extent, the great Qin dynasty could be viewed as two completely different forces with and without the immortal dragon city. A considerable number of people were secretly paying attention to Shi Zhongmao's harvest on this trip. In the end, he returned empty-handed, and many people saw it with their own eyes. However, news soon spread from the great Qin dynasty's capital, West Hill City. Although the immortal dragon city no longer existed, Shi Xingyun, the daughter of the great Qin dynasty's former emperor Shi Yu, was with the immortal dragon city and was currently cultivating outside. When the news spread, the others couldn't help but be shocked. The great Qin dynasty's actions were obviously to intimidate others. As for the fact that Shi Xingyun was indeed cultivating outside and had no intention of returning to the great Qin dynasty, they naturally kept it a secret. However, in order to avoid the opposite effect, they naturally wouldn't do something stupid like speaking on Shi Xingyun's behalf. As long as they didn't go too far, Shi Xingyun would most likely turn a blind eye and not directly embarrass the great Qin dynasty. However, whether it was Shi Zongtang, Shi Zongmao, or the others, they all wanted to get Shi Xingyun to return, so they naturally wanted to befriend her. However, not saying it out loud was enough to cause some sort of effect and mislead the others in the divine land. Even if there were people who tried to ask Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, who were also present at the scene, for confirmation, Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao only remained silent and did not take the initiative to undermine the great Qin dynasty. Naturally, within the great Qin dynasty, Shi Chongyun and his mother's status rose, and they couldn't be compared to before. After the great Qin dynasty's new emperor Shi Zongtang ascended to the throne, although he didn't wantonly confer titles to the members of the royal family, nor did he appoint a crown prince, there was no doubt that the former crown prince Shi Chongyun's situation had become quite awkward. Of course, Shi Zongtang didn't mistreat him, but the throne of the great Qin dynasty was clearly far away from him. Even if he had a chance in the future, it would be very unlikely. After the changes in the immortal dragon city and Shi Xingyun's body, Shi Chongyun's situation once again became strange. For example, after the emperor of Zhou, Liang Pan, was deposed, and the new emperor was Liang Qian. Now, the great Qin dynasty's royal family already had a certain opinion. Since Shi Xingyun wasn't willing to become the emperor and had a grudge against him, they might as well help Shi Chongyun ascend to the throne and attract him back to the great Qin dynasty. Although Shi Chongyun was arrogant and greedy, he had a deep friendship with Shi Xingyun, who came from the same mother as him. Back then, only Shi Yu, Shi Zongtang, Shi Zongmao, and a few other high-ranking members of the great Qin dynasty knew about Shi Xingyun's background. Shi Chongyun, like most people, only thought that Shi Xingyun's dragon soul was acquired. However, Shi Chongyun didn't hold a grudge against him. For Shi Chongyun, who had always been greedy and domineering, this was an extremely rare thing. Even though Shi Xingyun's talent in cultivation was better than his, and even though the divine land wasn't without an empress, Shi Chongyun didn't have any suspicions about Shi Xingyun. Shi Xingyun had always been supportive of his elder brother. Back then, when the dual-pupiled Shi Tianyi had risen to power and there was a lot of talk within the great Qin Empire about the succession of the crown prince, Shi Xingyun had always supported Shi Chongyun in public and in private. The two of them were also very close to their mother. Although this kind of opinion wasn't mainstream for the time being, and they had to be wary of the current emperor of Qin Shi Zongtang's opinion, it gradually spread. Shi Zongtang didn't act out because of this, as if he had tacitly agreed to it. As long as Shi Chongyun and his mother stayed in the great Qin dynasty, it would be difficult for Shi Xingyun to truly cut them off. However, when the real chaos was about to happen, if Shi Xingyun only took them away, no one else would be able to stop him. As for putting them under house arrest or threatening to tear them apart, it would only make the situation worse. Not long after, Shi Xingyun returned to West Hill City as promised. She visited her mother, elder brother, and Shi Jingyun and her other close friends. She had a secret conversation with the new emperor of Qin Shi Zongtang and Prince Riyang Shi Zongmao in the palace. Apart from the people involved, no one else knew about it. However, Shi Xingyun didn't stay for long before she left West Hill City again. After that, Shi Xingyun went to Kunlun Mountain and received guidance from the Celestial Gates sect master, Lin Feng. After staying for a while, she left the mountain and disappeared. Shi Xingyun's complicated and confusing journey confused the people in the divine land. They did not know what the relationship between Shi Xingyun and the great Qin dynasty was. However, when others calculated the strength of the great Qin dynasty, they had to include Shi Xingyun in their calculations. In a sense, the great Qin dynasty had achieved at least part of its goal. They could relax a little and focus on recuperating. After that, the situation in the vast land of the divine land became relatively stable. Apart from the ancient dynasty that had gained a firm foothold and was cautious and gentle, but still unswerving in its own pace of expansion, nothing else happened. In the face of the ancient dynasty's footsteps, the weakened Great Qin and Great Zhou adopted a conservative stance. They guarded their own territory and tried their best to resist the development of the ancient dynasty. The Taishu Temple and the Mount Shu Sword sect remained in seclusion. The commotion caused by the news of the zenith heaven gradually calmed down. At least on the surface, no one mentioned it anymore. Instead, everyone started to care about where the new disciple of the Celestial Gates sect master was. However, the zenith heaven never appeared again. Even Xianmen Tianzong couldn't sense the existence of the ninth uncle master or ninth uncle master within his own family. Everything seemed to have become a mystery. In the following period of time, due to the loss of the war between the two worlds, they faced less pressure from the human race and did not attack each other as much. However, the news from the enchantress that there was a treasure related to the spirit ocean attracted everyone's attention. For a time, there was a storm as many fights broke out. Although everyone restrained themselves due to the pressure from the human race, the competition was still quite intense. After the various human factions received the news, some joined in as well, causing the situation to become even more chaotic. Overall, however, after the war between the two worlds, the overall situation in the heaven primordial world became stable. Be it the human race or the demon race, they all entered a period of recuperation and accumulation of power. The overall situation entered a new balance. The fact that Lin Feng had taken in a zenith heaven as his disciple did not become the opportunity to break the balance. The news about the spirit ocean that the enchantress had spread also did not break the balance. In fact, the overall situation became even more stable because of the existence of the spirit ocean. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the day the spirit ocean reopened and prepared for it. Time passed quickly in such a peaceful period. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years had passed in the vast thousand worlds. At the moment, the overall situation in the divine land had not changed much compared to before, apart from the fact that the ancient dynasty's territory had expanded further. However, what the divine land was more concerned about was that after Dao Yuding, there were other second-generation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong who had reached the Yuan soul realm, and there were more than one of them. All of them displayed extraordinary power. What everyone had considered in the past was gradually becoming a reality. Although Xianmen Tianzong, the new behemoth, was already standing at the peak of the world, its power was still far from reaching its peak, and it was still in a state of rapid development. Its deep accumulation continued to manifest as time passed, becoming more and more astonishing. Within Xianmen Tianzong, there did not seem to be much of a reaction to this. The younger disciples were all focused on cultivating. One day, the master of the heavenly palace, Zhu Yi, returned to his cave abode. With a wave of his sleeve, a white-haired old man with a weathered face appeared before him. The old man looked at the furnishings in the palace with a complicated gaze, but he quickly composed himself and bowed respectfully to Zhu. Chapter 1361. This old man was old and had dark skin. His skin was rough, but his bones were strong. He looked like he had experienced heavy physical labor all year round. Slowly, he bowed to Zhu Yi and said respectfully, "Master." Zhu Yi looked at this old man and said, "Yunxing, 100 years have passed. It's time for you to return." The old man bowed to the ground and said softly, "Yes, master." Zhu Yi had long since stopped accepting disciples. The second-generation core disciples of Qian Tian Palace had all grown up and become the pillars of Xianmen Tianzong. However, if they were to appear here at this moment, none of them would believe that this weathered old man who didn't seem to have any cultivation was actually one of the top figures among the second-generation disciples of the Qian Tian Palace and even the entire sect, Su Yunxing. Not long ago, before the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly, Su Yunxing and Ying Luozo were known as the two prides of the second-generation core disciples. At that time, apart from Dao Yuding's special circumstances, their only opponents were each other. In the competition between the two of them, Su Yunxing had a slight upper hand. This was a battle of strength between the two of them, and in terms of popularity within the sect, Su Yunxing was far superior to Ying Rosa. Back then, Su Yunxing could be said to be the leading figure of the younger generation in the sect, and his future was bright. Almost all the true disciples of the Heaven Palace sect followed his lead. However, 25 years ago, Su Yunxing, who had just reached core formation, suddenly disappeared from the sect and was never heard from again. As for his whereabouts, Lin Feng and Zhu Yi kept it a secret and didn't reveal it. They only said that Su Yunxing went out to train and was safe and sound. However, it was as if he had disappeared from the world and didn't communicate with anyone, including his younger sister, Su Miaoying. The old man who appeared in front of Zhu Yi was the second-generation successor disciple from back then. He was also Zhu Yi's proud disciple, Su Yunxing. The flow of time in the heaven mystic realm was 4 times faster than that of the outside world. 25 years in the outside world was equivalent to 100 years in the heaven mystic realm. What no one knew was that Su Yunxing's cultivation had been sealed for the past 100 years. He had hidden his identity and worked in the heavenly profound realm's mine. During the first 50 years of his life, under Zhu Yi's arrangements, he even experienced his first death of old age. Then he moved to a different place, regained his youth, and started the second 50 years all over again. In these 2 lives, he experienced hard work, birth, old age, sickness, and death that every mortal had to go through. Just like that, he lived through a long 100 years. Today, 100 years had passed. Not a day earlier, not a day later, his master, Zhu Yi, had personally brought him back to Jade Capital Mountain from the mystic heaven realm. Zhu Yi looked at Su Yunxing, and with a thought, Su Yunxing felt his body suddenly lighten. The dusty golden elixir once again glowed with vitality, and streams of magic power and spiritual qi once again poured into his old and shriveled body. Su Yunxing knelt on the ground without moving, but his wrinkled, dry, and rough skin began to become rosy and plump again. His pale hair became black and lustrous again. His hunched back gradually straightened, and his turbid eyes became clear again. Although he was still wearing a tattered linen robe, Su Yunxing's entire appearance and temperament had become completely different. He had once again become the cultivator of the golden elixir period, the handsome young man. It was as if 100 years had not left any traces on his body. Only his pair of eyes were even more calm and tranquil. Although the Su Yunxing of the past was modest and courteous to the outside world, and friendly and kind to the inside world, there was pride and inferiority hidden under his peaceful appearance. He was like an eagle with broken wings, stubbornly trying to fly higher, but also worried that he might fall at any time. In contrast to Rose's undisguised arrogance, the seemingly modest Su Yunxing was also arrogant. But now, his eyes were as calm as water, and the pride gradually turned into confidence and indifference, while the inferiority disappeared. Su Yunxing bowed deeply toward Zhu. Master, disciple has returned. He had finally returned to the life that he yearned for in the past, the bright world from the dark heaven mystic realm. He no longer had the great Zhou dynasty standing behind him and holding his weakness. He no longer had to worry that his identity could be exposed at any time. He no longer had to suffer the torment of doing harm to his sect. He no longer had to worry that the life he yearned for and the bright world would completely leave him. From now on, when he stood under the sun, there was only his own shadow behind him, and there would be no more ghosts. Even if he had to work hard in the heaven mystic realm for 100 years, living twice as long as an ordinary person's life, he would gladly endure it. Zhu Yi looked at Su Yunxing and said, Yunxing, now that you've returned to the sect, everything will start anew. When you look back in the future, you'll realize that these 100 years weren't completely wasted, but right now, you've indeed lost 100 years compared to others. 100 years in the heaven mystic realm is 25 years in the great thousand world. Many things have changed, but people have changed. Su Yunxing smiled. I understand, Master. I'm ready. Even if Zhu Yi didn't say it clearly, Su Yunxing had already thought of many things. In fact, he had already thought of it before he entered the heaven mystic realm. 25 years in the great thousand world, including the time acceleration of Xianmen Tianzong's universe hall and mysterious heaven's time paradise, wasn't a long period of time for many forces in the cultivation world. In fact, some people could even spend a longer period of time in seclusion. But for Xianmen Tianzong's disciples, this period of time was enough for earth-shaking changes. Su Yunxing himself was a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, so how could he not know what kind of progress his fellow disciples and juniors had made? At the moment, he was still at the early stage of the golden elixir realm, but the second-generation true disciples who were his peers in the past had all far surpassed him in terms of cultivation. In the 10 years since the end of the war between the two worlds, not only did the second-generation true disciples and Dao Yuding emerge, but more essence soul realm cultivators also emerged. Xianmen Tianzong's Yuanying and golden elixir period cultivators also surged, forming a huge number that shocked the entire heaven primal world. Not to mention the second-generation true disciples, even the third-generation true disciples had already formed the Yuanying realm. Not only his peers, but even his juniors and nephews had already caught up and left Su Yunxing far behind. This was even under the circumstance that Xianmen Tianzong delayed the fourth-generation true disciples from entering the sect. Otherwise, Su Yunxing might even face the awkward situation of his grand-disciples surpassing him. In fact, such a situation was not uncommon in some forces that had a longer history. The seniors would waste their time, and the juniors would catch up. But for Su Yunxing, It was really a test to not lose his mind under the impact of such changes. After all, he was not an ordinary person among the second-generation true disciples in the past. He was once a top-notch hero. Even when Xianmen Tianzong recruited geniuses, such as Tang Jun, Zhou Yunsong, and Han Yang, Su Yunxing could still enter the top 10 under normal circumstances. And these years, it was not because he was complacent and had the intention to waste it. He did not work hard to improve, but because it was a complete blank. There was no way to talk about working hard. However, Su Yunxing's expression was the same as usual. He smiled and said, "Even the cultivators in the golden elixir period have a lifespan of 1,000 years. Although disciple has a gap of 100 years, it is still not too late to work hard now. After everyone reaches the primordial spirit realm, their lifespans will be endless. At that time, it will take a long time to advance again. If disciple concentrates on cultivation, I may have the chance to catch up to the other senior and junior brothers." His tone was calm and not arrogant, but he was also full of confidence in himself. The 100 years of training in the heaven mystic realm were not without gains. If it was him in the past, he would have easily developed obstacles in his heart. But now, it was as if he was walking on flat ground, and there was not the slightest ripple in his heart. These years of tempering his mind and willpower was enough to benefit him for the rest of his life. Not to mention comparing himself with others, just comparing himself with himself, his future cultivation path would be much smoother than before. However, even if he improved, others would definitely not stagnate. The 100 years that he had missed was real. Su Yunxing had never imagined that after he came out of the heaven mystic realm and stepped on the path of cultivation again, he would be able to reach the sky in one step and yuanying in an instant. If cultivation was so easy, then all the cultivators in the golden elixir period would have sealed their cultivation and worked hard for 100 years. There would have been thousands of primordial spirit realm powerhouses all over the world. His gains were real, and so were his efforts. What he needed to do now was to concentrate on his cultivation and convert his gains into actual gains. He would then apply them to his own cultivation and catch up with his own efforts to make up for the time that he had lost. Although it might be awkward to meet many juniors and disciples that he did not even know, he had to meet them. Although compared to the inside of his own sect, when he went out again in the future, the people of other forces in the outside world would be even more embarrassing. There would even be contempt and ridicule. There would even be people who would take him as a stain to ridicule the celestial sect of wonders. But Su Yunxing had already been mentally prepared for all this before he entered the heaven mystic realm. At this moment, his state of mind would not be affected at all. What really made Su Yunxing's mind a little shaken was that there were a few people that he would have to face again. Although there was no news in the heaven mystic realm, Zhu Yi did not completely go to the extreme. He would tell Su Yunxing simple news about Su Miaoying so that he could be at ease. Therefore, Su Yunxing knew that his sister had become a disciple of Yang Tai and was now a Yuanying cultivator with the Taoist title Perfected Lord Yuanying. As for the other person, Su Yunxing had never heard any news about her. Although he kept telling himself to forget about her, it always lingered in his heart. Chapter 1362. In a side hall of the Qian Tian Palace in Xianmen Tianzong, a purple-robed female cultivator with a star crown was sitting on the main seat. In the air in front of her, there were flashes of light and shadows, showing the wonders of all living beings. Below her, there were many young disciples sitting in an orderly manner, listening to her carefully. After the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong became true inheritors, they each had their own masters. Usually, they would follow their masters and focus on cultivating, but sometimes, there would be public lectures like when they were foundation disciples in the Yunfeng Hall. This was because most of their elders had their own strengths, but there were some principles that the younger generation disciples also needed to study. They didn't need to be very proficient, but at least they had to dabble in it and not be ignorant. Therefore, from time to time, different elders would give public lectures on a certain aspect. Other than those who went out to travel or cultivate in seclusion, the younger generation disciples had to attend the lectures, and at the same time, they had to be tested by the elders after the lectures. That's all for today. After you go down, try to figure it out carefully. The next time I give a lecture, I will test you. Although it won't be difficult, don't take it lightly, the female cultivator said after finishing today's lecture. The younger generation disciples immediately stood up and bowed. We won't forget. They left one after another, and the female cultivator in the main hall also stood up. She looked at the roof of the side hall with a slightly dazed gaze. Why do I feel a little uneasy? What is it? Her heart suddenly moved, and she turned her head to look at the entrance of the main hall. After a while, a young man appeared there. The two of them looked at each other, and the young man smiled. Little sister, I'm back. Su Miaoying, who was a role model in front of the fourth-generation true inheritors, had already become Yuaning. At this moment, she stood there in a daze. She couldn't control her emotions, and her heart ached. Brother? Su Yunsheng looked at his sister, and his heart was filled with emotions. Although they hadn't seen each other for many years, the brother and sister had never become estranged. They had depended on each other since they were young, and after the erosion of time, their relationship became even stronger. All these years, Su Miaoying had been trying to find Su Yunsheng. She missed her elder brother all the time, and during the long years that Su Yunsheng was in the heaven profound realm, how could he not miss his only family member in this world? Su Yunsheng arrived in front of Su Miaoying and said with a smile, "You've also formed your nascent soul. You're even stronger than me, your big brother. I really don't feel good. Before, it was always me protecting you, but now it's you who can stand up for me." Hearing Su Yunsheng's teasing words, Su Miaoying also laughed. She took 2 steps back and bowed to Su Yunsheng. Disciple Su Miaoying greets martial uncle Tian Su. Senior sister Miaoying. At this time, another female cultivator wearing the Qian Tian Palace's uniform just happened to walk into the main hall, and she couldn't help but be stunned when she saw this scene. When Su Miaoying saw that female cultivator, her brows moved slightly. She glanced at Su Yunsheng from the corner of her eyes and saw that Su Yunsheng's expression was normal, as if he was waiting for her to introduce him. Junior sister Jiao, this is my elder brother, Su Yunsheng. He's also the martial uncle of our Qian Tian Palace's Tian generation. Together with martial uncle Tian Bai, they're the earliest disciples of Grandmaster. Seeing that Su Yunsheng didn't mind, Su Miaoying immediately introduced them with a smile. Brother, this is my junior sister, Jiao Qing. Her Taoist name is Yuan Hui. We've become master's disciples together. She joined the sect late, so you haven't met her before. The newcomer was Yang Tai's true disciple, Jiao Qing. When she joined the sect, Su Yunsheng had already been in the heaven profound realm for a long time. Although Jiao Qing joined the sect late, her talent in Tao was outstanding, and she made rapid progress in her cultivation. When she first joined the sect, she had already displayed an extremely top-notch talent. After all these years of cultivation, including the time she spent in the accelerated time grotto heaven, she had successfully formed her nascent soul. She was a rising star among the third-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. She looked at Su Yunsheng, and after the initial shock, she already remembered who the person in front of her was. Although they had never met before, Su Yunsheng's image was preserved in Xianmen Tianzong, so Jiao Qing naturally recognized him. However, ever since she joined the sect, she had never seen Su Yunsheng appear, so she couldn't help but be a little surprised when she saw him. The fourth-generation true disciples might not know much about Su Yunsheng, but most of the third-generation true disciples knew that there used to be such an influential martial uncle. Although she didn't know why Su Yunsheng was still in the early golden elixir realm, Jiao Qing still solemnly bowed to Su Yunsheng. Disciple Yuan Hui greets martial uncle Tian Su. Su Yunsheng smiled slightly. Learning doesn't matter before or after, the one who has reached the peak is the first. The sex etiquette can't be neglected, but after this exchange, there's no need to be so restrained. Jiao Qing smiled. Martial uncle is martial uncle after all. I'm fine, but senior sister Miaoying might be a little embarrassed. She originally had a more active temperament, stubborn and eager to excel, but also cheerful and lively. As her cultivation deepened and she grew older, she became much more mature, but she still didn't change her past temperament. In terms of cultivation and talent, although she joined the sect late, she originally had the strength to compete for the position of the first seat disciple of the Qian Tian Palace's third-generation true disciples. Back then, Ying Rose's disciple, Meng Honglu, and Yi Xinhui, who was also under Yang Tai's tutelage with her and Su Miaoying, were also qualified. Later, Yi Xinhui won and became the Qian Tian Palace's third-generation true disciple, but in terms of strength, Meng Honglu and Jiao Qing were even slightly better. It was just that one of them was more cold and unsociable, while the other was more lively. Neither of them were good at teaching the younger generation, so they withdrew from the selection. Su Miaoying looked at her and smiled. "What's there for me to be embarrassed about? He's my elder brother, and also my martial uncle. When I was young, my elder brother and I depended on each other. It's also appropriate to say that an elder brother is like a father." Jiao Qing looked at Su Miaoying, smiled, and didn't say anything else. She sighed inwardly. The Su Miaoying today was indeed very different from before. In the past, although Su Miaoying treated people kindly, she was stubborn and eager to excel, even more so than others, including Jiao Qing. Although she wouldn't always have a cold expression, Su Miaoying often had a frown on her face all these years, as if she had a heavy burden on her mind. She had almost never been as relaxed and happy as she was today. As the three of them spoke, a crack in the void appeared in the side hall. The torn void was like an ordinary door. A purple-clothed youth slowly walked out, his entire person seeming to have become one with the world, inseparable and omnipresent. Seeing this youth, Su Miaoying and Jiao Qing solemnly bowed. Disciple greets master. The person who came was the second-generation direct disciple of the Qian Tian Palace, Yang Tai. Today, he had already reached the primordial soul realm, and his title was Dao Master Tian Tai. Although he was only a second-generation disciple in Xianmen Tianzong, when he went out, he played an important role in the entire Divine Land and was personally received by many sect leaders. When Yang Tai saw Su Yunxing, he first bowed. "Senior brother." Seeing this, Su Yunxing immediately returned the greeting. "Tai, how have you been?" A smile appeared on Yang Tai's face. "Senior brother, it's good that you're back safe and sound." Now, Zhu Yi did not directly manage the matters of the Qian Tian Palace and the sect, and the burden was gradually handed over to Yang Tai. Now, whether it was inside or outside the sect, Yang Tai's reputation was extraordinary. However, in front of Su Yunxing, he seemed to have returned to the time when he had just joined the sect. At that time, he had joined the sect late, and other than listening to his master Zhu Yi's teachings, he would often ask Su Yunxing for guidance when he had any questions about the Tao. Su Yunxing had always been honest with him, and the two of them had a deep friendship. Now, the world had changed, and the two of them were worlds apart in terms of cultivation. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. If it was someone else in this situation, Yang Tai did not know how they would feel and whether their mentality would change. However, at this moment, when he saw Su Yunxing, there was only respect and joy in his heart. When Su Yunxing saw Yang Tai, he did not feel ashamed of his inferiority, nor did he pretend to be arrogant. Instead, there was joy in his calm voice. "Indeed, I am satisfied to be able to return to the sect." Yang Tai turned to look at Su Miaoying and Jiao Qing. He said, "You two go back to your cave residences to cultivate first. Master has something to discuss with your martial uncle. Miaoying, you don't have to be anxious. Master will only take a little time." Jiao Qing nodded, but Su Miaoying's eyes showed a hint of worry. Seeing this, Su Yunxing smiled and said, "Don't worry, I will not leave the sect easily this time." He did not mention the previous matter at all, and Yang Tai and Su Miaoying did not ask much. At this moment, hearing his words, Su Miaoying smiled with some embarrassment. She quickly bowed to Yang Tai and left with Jiao Qing. After the two of them left, Yang Tai sighed with a smile. "Even as her master, this is the first time I have seen Miaoying like this. She has always been worried about senior brother all these years." Su Yunxing smiled and softly sighed. "I know that this time I will not leave. I will not leave again." Yang Tai glanced at Su Yunxing, and he could tell that Su Yunxing's words contained a lot of emotions, but he still didn't ask about it, and he continued, Besides Miao Ying, senior brother Ying Luoza has always been looking for news and whereabouts of you, senior brother. Every time his disciple, martial nephew Yuan Xing, and even his disciples go out to gain experience, they've been repeatedly instructed to pay attention to news of you. I'm definitely no match for him now. Even his disciples are far superior to me. Su Yunxing smiled, and he didn't mind teasing himself in front of Yang Tai at all. Not to mention that times are different from the past. Even though I don't know the exact situation in the sect, just based on what I know from the past, no matter if it's you, junior brother Yang, or junior brother Zhou from the 5th martial uncle's faction, you're probably stronger than Ying Rosa. Besides that, there's also eldest martial uncle's junior sister Lin, 3rd martial uncle's senior sister Dao, and youngest martial uncle's junior brother Huang. He has plenty of opponents to find. In this kind of situation, if he is still obsessed with competing with me, then Ying Luoza's vision is too small. Yang Tai looked at Su Yunxing. Senior brother, you do not mean what you say. Do you know something? Su Yunxing's expression did not change, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. His experiences when he was young had made him sensitive. He was aware of Zhuge Wanqiu's thoughts in the past, and he also vaguely felt that Ying Luoza was paying attention to Zhuge Wanqiu, but he could not be sure. However, after hearing what Yang Tai said today, how could he not understand that Ying Luoza was so obsessed with finding his whereabouts for so many years because of Zhuge Wanqiu? However, even though he had a deep friendship with Yang Tai, it was difficult for him to explain in detail. Wait! Su Yunxing's heart suddenly sank, and a solemn look appeared in his eyes. Ying Luoza has been looking for me for so many years, that means that junior sister Zhuge. Chapter 1363. Just as Su Yunxing had said, Su Yunxing was not the only opponent Ying Rosa was looking for. Ying Rosa had always been determined to find Su Yunxing not because of their previous competition, but because of Zhuge Wanqiu. But from this, it could be seen that Ying Rosa and Zhuge Wanqiu had always been at odds with each other, and the reason was not because of anyone else, but because of Su Yunxing. 100 years in the mystic heaven realm was 25 years in the broad thousand worlds. Zhuge Wanqiu would usually cultivate in the heaven grotto heaven with accelerated time. Such a long time might not be too long for cultivators, but Su Yunxing did not want Zhuge Wanqiu to go through such a long wait and suffering. Moreover, Su Yunxing had to admit that he had actually felt a little guilty to Zhuge Wanqiu and the others back then, and subconsciously wanted to stay away from them. However, Zhuge Wanqiu, who had always been weak and had no opinions of her own, had always been firm on this matter. Although Zhu Yi did not tell her Su Yunxing's whereabouts and the specific situation, she knew from Zhu Yi that Su Yunxing's life was not in danger and that he was safe and sound. So she continued to wait, even if she did not know how long she had to wait. After Su Yunxing realized this through his conversation with Yang Tai, his first reaction wasn't joy, excitement, or complacency, but deep guilt. Su Yunxing's eyes faintly showed pain. In the end, I still delayed her. He took a deep breath, shook his head, and looked at Yang Tai. Tai, you must have a lot of things to do now. Go take care of them and don't worry about me. We can slowly catch up later. I'm going to see the other senior and junior brothers now. Seeing Su Yunxing's expression, Yang Tai knew that he had something on his mind, but he did not ask too much. Instead, he nodded. Senior brother Su, it's good that you returned safely. Everyone misses you. After saying goodbye to Yang Tai, Su Yunxing left the Qiantian Palace and walked towards the desolate Sky Valley. He stopped at the entrance and looked at the valley in front of him in silence. At this moment, a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes suddenly appeared in front of Su Yunxing. He sized him up and asked hesitantly, "Are you Martial Uncle Tiansu?" The young man had seen all the disciples of the celestial sect of Xianmen on Jade Capital Mountain, except for Su Yunxing, who he had never seen before. However, when he thought of the image of Su Yunxing that he had seen before, he tried to ask. It was impossible for a fake Xianmen Tianzong disciple to appear on Yujing Mountain, and it was impossible for a member of the evil spirit to sneak in. However, this young man's Grand Master and Master both paid attention to actual combat and were extremely daring people. Perhaps they really connived with the scoundrel to sneak in, and then secretly observed the response of their juniors and disciples, honing their vigilance and adaptability. When the young man saw Su Yunxing, he didn't dare to be sure. In particular, it was rumored that Su Yunxing was an outstanding figure among the second-generation successor disciples of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. He was the first disciple of the former master of the Celestial Palace, Zhu. Long before Yang Tai's rise, Su Yunxing was publicly recognized as the person most likely to become the second-generation successor disciple of the Celestial Palace. In the eyes of many, it was precisely because he had suddenly left the mountain and had not been heard from for many years that the rising star Yang Tai became the second-generation true disciple of the Qian Tian Palace master. Yang Tai had now reached the primordial soul realm, but Su Yunxing was still only at the early golden elixir realm. Not to mention Yang Tai, Ing Rosa, and the young man's master, even the tiger-eyed young man himself had a much higher cultivation level than Su Yunxing. Such an abnormal situation inevitably made the young man feel uncertain. Su Yunxing smiled. "I am Su Yunxing." He seemed to know what the young man in front of him was thinking, so he didn't make things difficult for him. He raised his right hand, and as light and shadow floated on the back of his hand, a faint Tai Chi pattern appeared. Yin and Yang fused and rotated continuously. When the young man saw this light pattern, although the doubt in the depths of his eyes did not decrease, his expression clearly relaxed. The young man bowed to Su Yunxing. "Disciple Shi Yang, Taoist name Yuandan, greets Uncle Master Tiansu." He was Huang Zhenting's disciple, Shi Yang, the third-generation direct disciple of Xian Gate Sky Sect's desolate Sky Valley. When he was young, he was also like a devil incarnate. Now that his cultivation had deepened and he was getting older, he became much more mature. Although he was curious about Su Yunxing's current cultivation realm, he still bowed respectfully without losing his sense of propriety. However, when he heard Shi Yang's Taoist name, Su Yunxing was also slightly stunned. When he recovered, he couldn't help but smile. "Is little Uncle Master here?" Su Yunxing was the first to ask. If Shi Tianhao was in the Heaven Desolate Valley, he would first greet him. Shi Yang replied, "Grandmaster is not on the mountain. My master has gone to the Heaven Desolate Villa. Now, Uncle Master Tianhong is in charge of the cave abode on Jade Capital Mountain." After a short pause, he added, "Also, Uncle Master Tiansu, the ancestral master, accepted another 9th Uncle Master as a disciple. Although I haven't seen him all these years, my grandmaster is currently ranked last among the male disciples under the ancestral master. He was now also a teacher and the leader of the third-generation true disciples in the Heaven Desolate Valley, so he was very familiar with the sect's etiquette. However, when he said that, everyone knew that he still had the imposing manner of the past. Su Yunxing didn't mind and smiled. "Is that so? I've been away for a long time and just returned to the mountain, so I didn't know that there was such a big matter. However, what do you mean by Tianhong?" Shi Yang said, "Tianhong is Uncle Master Zhuge's Taoist name." Su Yunxing's eyes narrowed slightly, and he nodded. "I see. I understand now." When he formed his gold core, he went to the Heaven Mystic Realm immediately. At that time, Zhuge Wanqiu had not formed her gold core yet, so the sect naturally didn't give her a Taoist name. "I'm going to see junior sister Zhuge. You can do your own things. No need to stand on ceremony," Su Yunxing said to Shi Yang with a smile. Shi Yang immediately bowed to him and left. After entering the Heaven Desolate Valley, there would naturally be other Heaven Desolate Valley true disciples who would tell him where Zhuge Wanqiu was. Along the way, Su Yunxing walked to the front of a bamboo house. He looked from afar, and when he first saw the bamboo house, he found that the door was already open. Su Yunxing's gaze became slightly complicated. He already knew that Zhuge Wanqiu had now formed the Heaven and Earth avatar and cultivated to the late stage of Yuaning. It was not difficult for her to detect him, who was in the early stage of golden elixir, to enter the valley with her sudden inspiration and divine sense. When he reached the door of the house, he saw a slim figure dressed in purple muslin sitting with her back facing the door. She was motionless and silent. Su Yunxing looked at the back of the figure and fell into silence. For a moment, he felt that no matter what he said, it would be useless. After a long time, Su Yunsheng took a deep breath and said slowly, "I'm back." Hearing this, the figure trembled slightly. She stood up and turned to face Su Yunsheng. Her beautiful face was the same as before, but her eyes were fluctuating and not calm. However, when she spoke, she was still gentle and kind, just like when they were cultivating in the same sect. "Senior brother Su, how have you been?" Su Yunsheng nodded lightly, and the two fell into silence again. "Although I was born in the Su family of the Great Qin dynasty, I am not actually part of the Su family. My roots were not in the Great Qin dynasty, but in the Great Zhou dynasty." Su Yunsheng clenched his fists, clenched and loosened them, then loosened and tightened again. Finally, he completely relaxed and said in a calm tone, "Miaoying and I were wandering in the Great Zhou dynasty when we were young. We were adopted and raised by the spies of the Great Zhou dynasty. After that, I returned to the Su family and became a small chess piece of the Great Zhou dynasty in the Great Qin dynasty, while Miaoying remained in the Great Zhou dynasty." Hearing this, Zhuge Wanqiu's face showed some surprise. Not only Su Yunsheng, but also Su Miaoying's experience was something she had never heard of before. Su Yunsheng chose to stay in the Xiantian realm for 100 years, so his secret and reputation were protected by Zhui. His roots were only known by a very limited number of people in Shenmen Tianzong. But after that, I passed the sect's selection and was able to enter the sect. Thus, the Great Zhou dynasty's role and position towards me was adjusted accordingly. However, at that time, no matter if it was me or the Great Zhou dynasty, none of us knew that everything was already in the hands of the founder, master, and uncles. Su Yunsheng spoke of everything in a calm tone, as if what he was saying had nothing to do with him. After hearing about Su Yunsheng's choice, Zhuge Wanqiu's expression returned to normal, but her gaze became even more complicated. It was as if countless emotions were about to burst out in her heart, but they kept cooling down. She looked at Su Yunsheng and said in a low voice, "Second Uncle Master has never mentioned these things, and Master has never mentioned them either. Although I can see that Miaoying's experiences in her youth were not simple, her knowledge of your specific situation is limited. If you don't say it yourself, Second Uncle Master and the others will keep it the secret for you. No one will know." Su Yunsheng smiled. "I don't want to explain anything. It's just that I left without saying goodbye and made you wait for so long. I owe you an explanation." After hearing this, Zhuge Wanqiu's eyes narrowed, but Su Yunsheng continued, "Junior sister, I know your feelings. It's just that I've let you down and caused you to be infatuated with the wrong person. I don't want you to wait for a long time. At that time, I thought that it's better to forget each other than to wait for 100 years. Sometimes, letting go is also love. Now that I think about it, it was my selfishness. I never asked you for your opinion, and I never thought about what you were thinking." Su Yunsheng said softly, "I thought that with your conditions, you would definitely be able to marry someone else. It's not that I don't trust you, but I didn't want to hold you up. However, I didn't respect your wishes, so today's mistake was caused by me. I should bear all the consequences, but I don't know how to make it up to you. You're infatuated and stubborn, but I'm hesitant and acted on my own. I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. Today, I'm telling you my feelings not to explain, not to redeem anything, but because I feel that you should have the right to know everything. You should know that the person you're waiting for is not worthy of your wait." The current Su Yunsheng and Zhuge Wanqiu were no longer teenagers. Whether it was Su Yunsheng, who was telling the story, or Zhuge Wanqiu, who was listening quietly, neither of them felt embarrassed and said everything clearly. Chapter 1364. Zhuge Wanqiu looked at Su Yunsheng with a strange gaze. After he finished, she asked softly, "If I didn't wait alone all these years and became cultivation partners with someone else, would you have never told me these words, Senior Brother Su?" Su Yunsheng said, "If you were fated to be with someone else, I naturally wouldn't affect your life, your relationship with your partner, and your mind." Zhuge Wanqiu asked, "Isn't it messing with my mind now? Senior Brother Su, you're acting on your own again." Su Yunsheng sighed softly. Now, it's only fair for you to know all this. I've delayed you for so many years, and I don't want you to waste any more time. Zhuge Wanqiu walked to Su Yunsheng step by step. The two were inches apart, and Zhuge Wanqiu stared into his eyes. How can you be sure that in my heart, these years were wasted? How can you know that if I continue to wait, I'll be wasting time? Her rare aggressiveness made Su Yunsheng fall into silence for a while. After a long time, Su Yunsheng said softly, "If I told you everything back then, things would be completely different today. Unfortunately, I made a huge mistake." Zhuge Wanqiu's gaze gradually softened. "Before you entered the Shantian realm, you had me in your heart, right? All these years, you've always had me, right?" Su Yunsheng didn't hesitate, nor did he deny it. "Yes. You, Miaoying, and Master, the three most important people in my life. My little sister and I have depended on each other since we were young. She's the only family I care about, my true family. For her, even if my conscience condemns me, I'm still willing to be the secret spy of the great Zhou dynasty. Master changed my fate, allowing me to break free from the dark shackles of the past. In order to answer to him and the sect, I'm willing to endure any punishment. As for you, I once dreamed of accompanying you hand in hand and going into the future together, but because of my past, I only dared to exist in my fantasy. I owe you, but I don't know how to repay you. I can't shamelessly say that I'll take care of you in the future, and that treating you well is my repayment. That's me taking advantage of you, but it's not compensation." Silently, Zhuge Wanqiu looked at Su Yunsheng. "In the end, you still can't get over your own heart. Have you ever asked me if I need your compensation and what kind of compensation I want?" Su Yunsheng lowered his head and revealed a rare look of vulnerability. He moved his lips and revealed a bitter smile. "Yeah, I'm acting on my own again." He sighed softly, looked up at Zhuge Wanqiu, and said softly, "Wanqiu, I'm very sorry." Although his mind was sensitive and meticulous, Su Yunsheng and Zhuge Wanqiu were both inexperienced when it came to matters of the heart between a man and a woman. Because of his personality, Su Yunsheng was more reserved in this aspect. He could only make clumsy guesses about the other party's thoughts, but had never really communicated or expressed them. Even though Su Yunsheng had toiled in the heaven-profound realm for 100 years, he had never come into contact with the matters between men and women. Even though his mental state was much more mature now, he still lacked the slightest experience in this aspect. Zhuge Wanqiu tilted her head and looked at Yunsheng. Suddenly, she said softly, "Senior brother Su, please wait here. I'll be back soon." Even though I've told senior brother Ing Rosa more than once, he insisted on waiting for you to come back and listen to my thoughts. After so many years, I owe him an explanation. Su Yunsheng raised his eyebrows slightly and widened his eyes. Countless words welled up in his chest, but he forcefully suppressed them. In the end, he only said one word. Zhuge Wanqiu brushed past him and walked out of the bamboo house toward the Qian Tian Palace. It was only now that Zhuge Wanqiu's cheeks gradually blushed. She lowered her head slightly, just like a young girl who was also not good at expressing her feelings in the past. She walked a few steps, and the blush on her face gradually faded. Her gaze was still gentle, but there was a hint of determination. She said softly, "Daddy, let me be willful for once." A figure appeared in the void beside her. It was a middle-aged man in a white robe. He was tall, handsome, and had a pair of light golden eyebrows. He was Zhuge Wanqiu's father, a Dao integration stage cultivator, blazing Sun Dao Lord Zhuge Zhan. Zhuge Zhan walked beside Zhuge Wanqiu and looked at her lovingly. "Silly girl, I can arrange other things for you, but only you can make the decision on this matter. Actually, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if it's Su Yunsheng or Ing Rosa, both of them aren't worthy of you, my darling daughter. But since you like them, I can only help you sweep away all obstacles. You've waited for dozens of years. Until today, until now, when you know everything, your heart has not changed. I know what you're thinking. Do what you want to do." Zhuge Zhan furrowed his light golden eyebrows. "But if he betrays you in the future, I will kill him even if I have to risk offending the master of the Celestial Gate and easy." I will not care about the consequences. Hearing that, Zhuge Wanqiu shook her head. Father, that's not what I want to see. If such a day really comes, it's because I've sown the bitter fruit of my own doing. I'll naturally bear all the consequences myself. I have no regrets. The smile on her face brightened. But I believe that I am not wrong. At this age, no matter who I choose, he will no longer be as passionate as fire. Instead, he will be like a clear spring in the mountains, lasting for a long time. Zhuge Zhan said slowly, actually, if I had to choose between the two of them, I would prefer Irosa. At least he's straightforward and straightforward. It's not easy for someone like him to wait for you all this time. Zhuge Wanqiu said, daughter and Yingluozha Xixiang, becoming Taoist companions who walk the same path of cultivation together is not impossible, but they will only be Taoist companions, not husband and wife, because daughter only feels gratitude towards Yingluozha Xixiang, not love. If I use love to repay Senior Yingrosa's perseverance and sacrifice, what should I do when I meet a man who is more loyal and gives more than Senior Yingrosa? Of course, I am thinking too much. But if there is more than one person like Senior Yingrosa waiting for me, who will I give myself to now? Hearing her say this, Zhuge Zhan's expression softened a bit, but there was also a strong sense of loss in his eyes. His daughter had really grown up. This feeling made Zhuge Zhan's heart uncomfortable, and the complicated feelings inside were not to be told to outsiders. Zhuge Zhan's figure disappeared, and Zhuge Wanqiu came to the Qian Tian Palace alone. When she arrived outside one of the side halls, she saw a woman with a cold expression and a stubborn look standing at the door. When the woman saw Zhuge Wanqiu, she first bowed. Disciple Yuan Xing greets Uncle Master Tianhong. Zhuge Wanqiu naturally recognized the woman in front of her. She was Yingrosa's disciple, Meng Honglu. Among the 3 generations of direct disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, she was one of the top figures in terms of combat skills. However, this woman's personality was more aloof, and she rarely interacted with disciples of other sections. She was stubborn, cold and sharp. In terms of cultivation talent alone, although she was a rare top genius in the entire Divine Land, when compared to Xianmen Tianzong, she was not considered one of the top talents, and could only be said to be above average. However, Meng Honglu was of the same lineage as her master Yingrosa. Her talent in combat was shocking, and her combat skills were extraordinary. Among the 3 generations of direct disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, her combat skills were firmly in the top 5. When she traveled outside, she often had the battle record of defeating stronger opponents, and her reputation was illustrious. Meng Honglu always had a cold expression on her face, and rarely had a smile on her face. Zhuge Wanqiu also knew the reason. This woman was extremely competitive, and had always hoped to stand out among her peers. She was the first among the Yuan generation disciples to form the Golden Elixir. However, just like Su Yunxing and his master Yingrosa, as more talents emerged in Xianmen Tianzong, there were more and more top experts among the 3 generations of direct disciples. If Meng Honglu, Qing Wu Pavilion's 3rd generation direct disciple, Lian Huazhao, Fan Lin House's 3rd generation direct disciple, Chen Fanga, Desolate Sky Valley's 3rd generation direct disciple, Shi Yang, Fen Tianya's 3rd generation direct disciple, Duan Muhong, and Jiao Qing, who was also from the Qian Tian Palace, could still compete, there was one more person that pressed down on her heart like a mountain. That was the publicly recognized number 1 of Xianmen Tianzong's 3rd generation direct disciple, the Snow Wind Valley's 3rd generation direct disciple, Guozonghuang. Whether it was the speed of cultivation or the strength of those in the same realm, Guozonghuang was the best. At the same time, he was respected both inside and outside the sect, and had the demeanor of a leader that everyone thought highly of. Meng Honglu did not hate Guozonghuang, and only continued to squeeze out her potential and cultivate with all her might. However, as long as she could not beat Guozonghuang, she naturally could not be happy. However, in the eyes of Zhuge Wanqiu, Yingrosa, Zhao Huan, and the others, because of Guozonghuang's existence, Meng Honglu was stronger than expected. At ease. Zhuge Wanqiu nodded and said to Meng Honglu. Meng Honglu straightened up, looked at Zhuge Wanqiu and said, Master Tianhong, Master is waiting for you. Not long after Su Yunxing returned to the Qian Tian Palace, he immediately went to desolate Sky Valley, but Ing Rosa clearly knew that he had returned. However, Ing Rosa did not chase after him to desolate Sky Valley, but remained in the Qian Tian Palace. Zhuge Wanqiu pushed the door open and entered the hall. The hall's floor was empty. There were no tables or chairs, not even a praying mat. A thin, dark-skinned young man sat on the square stone floor. His eyes seemed to flash with lightning as he looked at Zhuge Wanqiu. He's back. Ing Rosa looked at Zhuge Wanqiu calmly. After you saw him, you came to me immediately. In other words, you still chose him. Zhuge Wanqiu sighed softly. I'm sorry, senior brother. The person in front of her was a late-stage Yuanine cultivator like her, but with his original pace, he should have reached the primordial soul realm like Yang Tai and the others. Ing Rosa slowly closed his eyes, his lightning-like gaze disappearing. Su Yunxing should be the one apologizing to you, but you don't have to apologize to me. All these years, every time I asked you, you always firmly rejected me. From the moment I made things clear, you never gave me any hope, and I was the one who thought too highly of myself. Since you're so heartless, I'll let it go. I'm not the type to be entangled, but I'm not willing to lose to a coward who left without saying goodbye and disappeared without a trace. Ing Rosa said indifferently. But since he's finally back, and your decision hasn't changed, then there's no need to say anything more between us. You may leave. Zhuge Wanqiu looked at the dark, skinny young man in front of her and fell into silence. After a long while, she silently bowed and took her leave. That day, Xianmen Tianzong, the second-generation direct elder of the Qian Tian Palace, Lord Tianbi, reached the primordial soul realm. Chapter 1365. On the third floor of the Hidden Scriptures Tower, Zhu Yi looked in the direction of his cave abode, the Qian Tian Palace, and sensed the changes in magic power there. Beside him sat a white-haired youth with an indifferent expression. He also looked in the direction of the Qian Tian Palace and asked, "Is it Ing Rosa?" Zhu Yi nodded and said, "That's right." He broke through the bottleneck of the past and successfully became an essence soul. This white-haired youth was Lin Feng's third disciple, the extreme Tao exalted Wang Lin. Beside Wang Lin was another purple-clothed youth. This youth's pupils were black and white, like yin and yang. He was Lin Feng's fifth disciple, the yin-yang Tao Lord, Yang Qing. Yang Qing also looked in the direction of the Qian Tian Palace, then at the desolate Heaven Valley, and finally at Zhu. Is it okay to just ignore it? Zhu Yi said, Marshal Ni Sky Rainbow went to seeing Rosa immediately after seeing Yunxing, which means that her choice hasn't changed. If that's the case, if Ing Rosa can't break through the bottleneck and become an essence soul so quickly after seeing Ing Rosa, then I'll really be worried. But now that Ing Rosa has successfully become an essence soul, everything is fine. As for Yunxing and Sky Rainbow, let them deal with this themselves. Yang Qing nodded and said, "That's right." Wang Lin asked, "How is Yun Song? Is he ready to take that final step?" Yang Qing smiled and said, "In order to ensure his safety, he's held back for so long. Now, he's naturally ready and can break through to the essence soul realm in a few days." Over the years, Yun Song has gotten used to it. Although he's easily anxious and irritable because of his burning sun constitution, he can already adjust himself. Zhu Yi and Wang Lin nodded and said, "That's good. After he becomes an essence soul, he won't have to worry about this anymore. Yun Song's future will be smooth." That's right, it's the last trial. It's not wrong to be cautious. After this trial, everything will be clear. Yang Qing looked at Wang Lin and said with a smile, "Eldest senior brother has Tian Song and Tian Qing, and now second senior brother has Tian Tai and Tian Bai. I wonder when will third senior brother have a second primordial spirit?" Wang Lin said, "As long as he survives today, he will have nothing to worry about. He shouldn't be any later than Yun Kong." Zhu Yi and Yang Qing looked at each other. "Are we leaving today?" Wang Lin nodded. "That's right. She left the mountain today and should have returned home by now." In Zhu Yi's eyes, he could vaguely see the Taoist talisman of Yi appearing, flickering with a faint light, constantly rotating. Wherever his gaze reached, the void of the scripture depository became deep and vast, as if a dome was right in front of him. There seemed to be an invisible figure in the sky. This person wore the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the rivers, and the seas as clothes. He looked down at everything in the sky indifferently. The person's face was almost blank, without any facial features. However, it was such a figure without facial features that exuded an incomparably majestic aura. It was as if he was the truth of this world, the ruler of this world, the maker of all rules, and represented the vast great Tao of heaven and earth. There seemed to be thousands of emotions flowing out from this person, but upon closer inspection, it felt as if everything did not exist. It was a void, empty. Deep in the heart of love, love turns thin. The way of great forgetting emotion is not heartless. The projection of Zhu Yi's gaze was impressively displaying one of the two supreme Tao techniques of the Void Temple, the way of great forgetting emotion. If there were direct disciples of Taishu Temple here, they would be able to recognize that the projection of Zhu Yi's gaze was still different from the real way of Tai Wangqing. However, if it were other cultivators outside of Taishu Temple, they would probably think that Zhu Yi and Xianmen Tianzong had already successfully comprehended this top great Tao technique. Slowly, the Taoist talisman of Yi in Zhu Yi's eyes spun. Thanks to the primordial heart demon concession mantra, although the orthodoxy is different, it has the effect of comprehending by analogy. Although it's just a simple deduction, it's enough for an experiment. Wang Lin nodded slightly. Beside him, black and white light flowed in Yang Qing's eyes, like the two extremes of yin and yang. The Taoist talisman of Yi also appeared in Zhu Yi's other eye, and another light burst out, forming another void, but it was completely dark. The yin and yang light in Yang Qing's eyes fell into this dark void, and immediately flowed endlessly, blending with each other. The yin and yang light turned into two streams of air, one black and one white. They intertwined in the seemingly boundless void, forming a cycle that seemed infinite. Yin and yang transformed into each other, supporting each other, gradually evolving into a momentum of creation. As yin and yang blended, everything was born in the endless void. Wang Lin's eyes moved slightly. Reverse. The black and white streams of air that were constantly rotating and blending suddenly stopped, and actually began to reverse, no longer evolving and expanding, but began to shrink continuously. As the yin and yang qi shrank, the endless void at this moment seemed to collapse as well. With the yin and yang qi as the center, it gathered towards a point and kept collapsing. On the other side, the sky that seemed to be Tai Wangqing and the heavenly Tao was in harmony suddenly changed at this moment. The invisible figure seemed to be gradually disappearing. It was not just invisible in the visual sense, but the entire body had become non-existent. However, under the sky, the ethereal and vast feeling became more and more mysterious, enveloping the surroundings. Yang Qing said, "We still need some confirmation before we can further clarify it." Zhu Yi nodded. The people in Taishu Temple will study it, and there will be feedback from the great Tao of heaven and earth. At that time, we will naturally be able to feel it. Yang Qing turned to look at Wang Lin. Our previous comprehension should have already caused the people in Taishu Temple to feel it through the great Tao of heaven and earth. They should have already sensed it. Martial nephew Tianqi, is it inappropriate for you to return alone? Wang Lin's expression was calm, and his eyes were indifferent. If there is really something wrong, I will be able to rush over in time. While the three of them were talking, in the void outside the vast thousand domains, in one of the medium-class worlds, the void broke open, and a woman in purple walked out from it. There was not the slightest trace of smoke or fire. The broken void did not have the slightest distortion or fracture, but was neat and tidy, as if an ordinary door had been opened. This woman in purple had a beautiful appearance, and looked to be in her 20s. She did not have much of an astonishing aura around her, but those who knew her did not dare to look down on her in the slightest. This was because she was the second-generation true disciple first-seat elder of Xianmen Tianzong's Fan Linju, Li Xingfei. Although she was not like her senior sister Dao Yuding, who had already reached the primordial soul realm. Her cultivation had long reached the late Yuanying stage. Li Xingfei's cultivation was slow at first, but then it sped up. Under the guidance of her master Wang Lin, her progress in these years was quite significant. Originally, she should have reached the primordial soul realm together with Huang Jinting and Yang Tai, but because of some unexpected matters, she was delayed. Today, she was here to deal with these matters. Li Xingfei's expression was calm as she walked in the void, not disturbing anyone. She descended near a city in this medium-class world. There was a manor outside the city, called the Li family manor. This was the place where Li Xingfei's parents lived. The manor seemed ordinary, but everyone within 1,000 miles knew that it was better to offend the city lord of the nearby big city than to provoke this seemingly ordinary manor. Although the Li family's environment was not bad in the past, its current prestige was naturally because of Li Xingfei. Even if Li Xingfei's fan Lin Ju and Xianmen Tianzong were not taken into account, just Li Xingfei alone was outstanding in the entire vast 1,000 domains. Li Xingfei entered the manor, but the servants did not seem to see her at all. Li Xingfei calmly walked all the way to the backyard. When her parents saw their daughters suddenly appear in front of them, they couldn't help but be a little surprised. "Father, mother." Li Xingfei was the first to greet her parents. Her father smiled and asked, "Why didn't you tell us that Junshin was coming back? Did you come back alone, or did you come with a fellow disciple?" Hearing her father call her by her nickname as usual, ripples gradually appeared in Li Xingfei's eyes that were as calm as water. The ripples continued to spread, and in the end, it was like a stormy sea. She could no longer maintain her calm. Seeing this, Li Xingfei's parents couldn't help but be even more surprised. Their daughter had always been calm and steady since she was young. Now that her cultivation was profound and she had a high status, even in front of them, they had never seen her so excited. Li Xingfei took a deep breath and softly said, "Father, mother, first take a look at these things and see if they are suitable." As she spoke, she took out a jade talisman and crushed it. A ray of light immediately flew out from the jade talisman. Under the illumination of this light, the space in the big house suddenly became distorted and changed. The vast and misty sky appeared in front of the family of 3. When Li Xingfei's parents saw this, their eyes flickered slightly. Li Xingfei's mother smiled and said, "Child, we don't know anything about your cultivation. If you show it to us, won't that be? She gradually couldn't finish her sentence. Li Xingfei's mother looked at the illusion of light and shadow in front of her, and her eyes gradually became dull. This is... She suddenly stood up and stared at the illusion of light and shadow. After a while, she suddenly turned to look at her husband. "This is really..." Li Xingfei's father also stood up from his chair in shock. He stared at the illusion of light and shadow for a long time. His eyes flashed with a brilliance that Li Xingfei had never seen before. At this moment, she really felt that her parents were a little strange to her. "No, it's not the same." After a long time, Li Xingfei's father let out a long breath. Li Xingfei's mother listened to him and stared carefully for a while. Finally, she also nodded. "It's really different." Their eyes fell on Li Xingfei at the same time. At this moment, Li Xingfei's emotions calmed down and she said calmly, "Father, mother, the two of you really do recognize the supreme Wang Qing Dao. Since that's the case, I wonder if you can give me some advice?" Chapter 1366. The gazes of Li Xingfei's parents fell on their daughter at this moment. The emotions contained within their gazes became somewhat complicated. Li Xingfei's father didn't say a word, but Li Xingfei's mother sighed and looked at Li Xingfei, asking, "What do you know?" "I didn't know until recently that you and Dad were both disciples of Taishu Temple. You weren't ordinary people like I knew, but cultivators like me, and your family background was quite extraordinary." Li Xingfei said, "If that's the case, why didn't you recommend me to Baiyun Mountain to learn martial arts? Even though you all lost your cultivation due to the destruction of the Dao heart of the supreme Wang Qing Dao and had no choice but to leave White Cloud Mountain, you all have no right to arrange for me to enter the Taishu Temple, but a chance to take the test can always be fought for." Li Xingfei's mother was silent for a while, and her eyes became more complicated. Didn't we want that? If it was really like that, we wouldn't be embarrassed today. Li Xingfei's father said, "It's okay now. You joined Xianmen Tianzong, and your cultivation is better than ours. We are also happy for you. You love Xianmen Tianzong very much. You respect your teachers and go on a blind date with them. Although we regret that you can't join Baiyun Mountain, it's not impossible now. On the other hand, the Taoist art conception that you're showing us now is similar to the supreme Wangqing Dao. What's its origin and what's its purpose?" Li Xingfei's father's expression had completely returned to normal. His eyes were as deep as the sea, without any ripples. Even though he didn't have any cultivation, now he still had a lofty momentum, which was completely different from the rich but ordinary look he used to have. Silently sitting aside, Li Xingfei's mother seemed to have completely changed. She was more elegant and noble than before. Li Xingfei replied indifferently, "This is the result of my master and a group of martial uncles studying the Taishu Temple's supreme path of Wangqing together and then obtaining some results." Li Tianlan's father frowned slightly. "Where did your master get the original copy of the supreme Wangqing Dao?" He had a rough idea of his daughter's state of mind. He knew that his daughter had a knot in her heart with him and his wife. Originally, he didn't want to escalate the conflict with his daughter and cause their emotions to become more and more antagonistic. However, this issue was too important to them and to the Taishu Temple. If even the supreme Wangqing Dao could be leaked, it would be unthinkable. However, Li Xingfei did not seem to mind. Instead, she answered honestly, "Our sect did not obtain the original copy of the Path of Great Wangqing. This was the result of my master and the others' research. Therefore, as you can see, it should be different from the real path of Great Wangqing." Mr. and Mrs. Li were stunned. Impossible! They instinctively intended to refute him, yet when the words had just arrived at their mouths, they couldn't help but recall the karma discussion of the Tao on Kunlun Mountain all those years ago. With a calm expression, Li Xingfei said, "Our sect's founder was a scholar of the heavens and exhausted the great Tao. Our sect's Tao is the closest to the great Tao of heaven and earth in the world. There is nothing strange about deducing other Tao techniques. Of course, without many clues to refer to, it is indeed impossible for it to be completely the same as the Tao techniques of other sects, but it won't be too different." Her tone was calm and natural, without any intention of bragging. It was as if she was describing something that couldn't be more normal. After hearing this, Mr. and Mrs. Li could not help but fall into silence. Not only the supreme Wangqing Dao, but also the void yin-yang Dao. My master and the others have also made deductions. Li Xingfei continued, with the birth of the future Buddha and the revival of Buddhism, the missing Dharma has naturally been made up. However, in our sect, one of the 5 Rulai Sutras, the Mavrokana Sutra, has also been deduced in recent years. Although it may not be exactly the same as the direct lineage of Buddhism, it may not be inferior. Mr. and Mrs. Li looked at each other. Even the void yin-yang Dao. But how could? Both of their eyes revealed a look of confusion. They subconsciously looked at the illusory scene of light that appeared after Li Xingfei crushed the jade talisman. To them, at this moment, they hoped that there was a problem within White Cloud Mountain, that someone had leaked the sect's Dao techniques. In this way, although the situation was serious, the root of the problem lay with someone. It would not be like now, where they felt that the whole world was surreal. Perhaps it was out of helplessness, or perhaps it was out of love. Even though their Tao hearts had been shattered and their cultivation lost, they were still loyal to White Cloud Mountain, where they had studied in the past. As for accepting Lin Daohan's arrangement to send their daughter to Xianmen Tianzong, they were not completely free of grudges. However, the deep-rooted belief in their hearts made them full of confidence in Taishu Temple. They firmly believed that their daughter's future would ultimately be in Taishu Temple. However, as Xianmen Tianzong had risen at a completely unexpected speed over the years, especially during the war between the two worlds more than 10 years ago, and everything that had happened after the war, Li Xingfei's parents had become somewhat at a loss. Although they firmly believed in the deep foundation and powerful inheritance of their sect, Xianmen Tianzong was not the shooting star that many people had previously thought it was. This new force had replaced Taishu Temple and become the great sun that shone over the divine land, illuminating the vast thousand domains as if it was daytime, causing all the stars to pale in comparison. Even Taishu Temple had to temporarily retreat in front of it, avoiding its sharp edge. Such a change made Li Xingfei's father and mother, who still considered themselves disciples of Taishu Temple, panic in their hearts. Because of the special reasons of the way of Supreme Wang Qing, their future had always been in Taishu Temple. However, would their daughter's future still be in Taishu Temple? Whether it was Li Xingfei's father or mother, they had always cared for Li Xingfei. As a result, the conflict between their own interests and the interests of their daughter had gradually become obvious, causing them to become more and more flustered. Over the years, Taishu Temple had been recuperating, keeping a low profile. Naturally, Lin Daohan would not make use of Li Xingfei's family, the hidden chess piece that he had planted many years ago. This allowed Li Xingfei's parents to breathe a sigh of relief. They could watch their daughter go higher and higher in Xianmen Tianzong with peace of mind. However, when they dreamed at night, their worries would always float in their hearts. Now, Li Xingfei's sudden arrival had revealed all of this, making it impossible for them to continue deceiving themselves. Father, mother, my master and the others have long known of your identity. They already knew about it before the war between the two realms. Li Xingfei said softly, it's just that they didn't want to make things difficult for me, so they have been holding back. My master has long known about your situation, so he waited until today to ask me to come back and clarify things with you. Li Xingfei's father and mother's gazes froze slightly at the same time. What do you mean? Li Xingfei looked at the illusory world of light and shadow that had manifested from the projection of the way of Supreme Wang Qing. The way of Supreme Wang Qing of Taishu Temple is indeed a unique way of Tao. Even the Grand Master of our sect has praised it. However, this way itself has flaws, which is why your Taoist heart has been broken, your cultivation has been lost, and you can't change to another way of Tao. Upon hearing this, Li Xingfei's father and mother's faces darkened, but they did not refute Li Xingfei. If it were other disciples of Taishu Temple, perhaps they would have a different reaction, but the two of them would not. Moreover, in the past, they had heard the elders of their sect occasionally mention this problem. The top-notch experts of Taishu Temple would not deceive themselves and ignore the problems in their way of Tao. They were also constantly seeking ways to improve it, and in fact, they had been continuously learning from it over the years. Li Xingfei said, this way of Tao, other than the study of my master and the others, the Grand Master of our sect has also given pointers, and this way of Supreme Wang Qing has already been greatly improved. Due to time constraints, there may still be flaws, and it cannot be fully mastered. However, if a powerful expert in Taishu Temple who practices this way of Supreme Wang Qing obtains it, they can verify it with each other and further study it, and the flaws in the way of Supreme Wang Qing may be remedied. She glanced at Li Xingfei's father and mother. This is undoubtedly a good thing for you, as well as other Taishu cultivators who have lost their cultivation due to the way of Supreme Wang Qing being broken. Upon hearing this, Li Xingfei's parents' hearts were in turmoil. Li Xingfei's father immediately focused all his attention on the illusion of light and shadow, and carefully studied it. On the other hand, Li Xingfei's mother looked at her daughter with a complicated expression. Qin Jun, what are you? Li Xingfei sighed. Mother, my master said that if the Grand Master and the others study the way of Supreme Wang Qing like this, they will be touched by the great Tao of heaven and earth. The top-notch experts of Baiyun Mountain's Taishu Temple will feel the feedback at the first moment. They should be very clear about what all this means. Li Xingfei's mother fell silent upon hearing this, and understood that this matter was no longer something they could decide. Li Xingfei also did not say anything else. She walked to her mother's side, sat down with her, and held her hand gently. After a long time, Li Xingfei's father closed his eyes, and then slowly opened them. There was a faint, mysterious brilliance circulating in his eyes, and his entire temperament seemed to have changed again. He turned to look at Li Xingfei and her mother, and slowly nodded. I'm afraid it's true. Although Li Xingfei's father's tone was calm, it was clear that his voice was trembling slightly, perhaps out of excitement or fear. Li Xingfei smiled. Father, mother, please contact the senior experts of Taishu Temple, they might be looking for a way in this regard. Li Xingfei's father and mother trembled at the same time, while Li Xingfei continued smiling. This is the reason why I'm here today. From today onwards, your future will be decided by yourselves. Even if you want to return to Baiyun Mountain and return to your sect, it might not be a bad thing. And my sect will always be Xianmen Tianzong. Li Xingfei's father and mother both took a deep breath. There were no longer any flaws in the way of Supreme Wang Qing. This not only meant that the cultivators of this path in Taishu Temple would no longer fall into the abyss, it also meant that their cultivation would be smoother and their strength would become stronger. Moreover, as Li Xingfei had said, apart from the way of Supreme Wang Qing, there was also the way of Void Yin Yang. Li Xingfei's father asked softly, Xianmen Tianzong, what do you want? Chapter 1367. Father Li and Mother Li looked at their daughter in front of them, but their expressions had become solemn. They no longer looked like they were chatting idly, but rather a conversation between a Taishu Temple cultivator and a Xianmen Tianzong cultivator. After the Taishu Temple cultivator obtained the results of Xianmen Tianzong's cultivation, they would completely perfect the two Taoist techniques. Xianmen Tianzong would also receive feedback, and they would also gain something. However, it was difficult to say who would gain more. In the eyes of Father Li and Mother Li, as well as the vast majority of people in the world, there was no doubt that the Taishu Temple would benefit more and improve more. Thinking of this, Li Xingfei's parents couldn't help but hesitate in the face of such a great gift in front of them. Li Xingfei listened to her father's question and shook her head. My master only said that these things can be brought to you, but he didn't say how to deal with them. If father and mother have doubts, there is no harm in contacting the elders of your sect and telling them about the situation. Father Li said, that's right. This kind of matter should be discussed with people of a higher level. Since it wasn't Li Xingfei's personal bestowal, then the entanglement within was destined to be something that people of their level could not participate in. Li Xingfei's weight was also not enough. She was only responsible for leading the way. This was naturally because of her special identity. After knowing that the details of Li Xingfei and herself had long been known by the higher-ups of Xianmen Tianzong, the Li couple felt slightly awkward facing their own daughter. Although they had never spoken about it, and even the husband and wife had never exchanged their opinions, in the depths of their hearts, as time passed and as Xianmen Tianzong became more and more powerful, the doubts and uneasiness in their hearts also increased day by day. For them, the influence of the sect's cultivation was deeply rooted, and because of the special Taoist techniques, it was their only hope to restore their cultivation. Their sense of identity towards Taishu Temple had never wavered. However, regarding their daughter's future, whether or not Taishu Temple was the best choice and home, they were no longer as resolute as they were in the past. Now that they knew the cause and effect of the matter, and after listening to Li Xingfei's clear stance, the Li couple didn't feel angry. Instead, they heaved a sigh of relief. However, as soon as these emotions appeared, the two of them were terrified. As the direct disciples of the Taishu Temple, their confidence in their own sect had been shaken to such an extent. The two of them looked at each other and were speechless for a moment. Mother Li sat quietly with Li Xingfei by her side. Father Li walked out of the house and sighed as he walked. We can't contact the sect directly. We need to go to a place to leave a mark and wait passively for the sect to contact us. Li Xingfei nodded. This was to be expected. If there was a treasure rich in spiritual energy in the family that could transmit sound, even if it could hide from her, it couldn't hide from second Marshal Uncle Zhu Yi, who had come to investigate back then. Mother Li looked at Li Xingfei and asked softly, Chenjun, do you blame us? I don't blame you. It's just that when I first found out about this, I found it a little hard to believe. Li Xingfei said calmly, although you have your own demands, your daughter knows that you're following the best and safest path you know, paving the path of my life for me. You hope that my life can be smooth sailing. However, I also have my own thoughts. Not to mention the fact that our sect has become more and more prosperous over the years, even if our sect is weaker than the Taishu Temple, as a disciple of the celestial sect, I won't abandon it, and I won't join another sect. Li Xingfei held her mother's hand and said calmly, If there is a battle between the Taishu Temple and our sect, and if our sect is defeated, your daughter will live and die with the sect. I just hope that when the time comes, I won't have to fight with father and you." Although she said this, Li Xingfei's expression didn't change at all. Clearly, she was full of confidence in the sect and didn't think that day would really come. When Li Xingfei's mother heard this, she smiled bitterly. "Silly girl, if that day really comes, how can your father and I watch you walk on that path?" After a moment of silence, Li Xingfei said slowly, "Mother, my master asked me to bring the Tao to see you. You can actually try to change to the way of Supreme Wang Qing derived by the seniors of our sect. Maybe it's possible to rebuild your Taoist heart." After the discussion of cause and effect, the Buddhist monk Dade succeeded in breaking and building. "You've cultivated the way of Supreme Wang Qing from the Taishu Temple. There's no need to provide it to our sect. You can practice it yourself. It's not impossible." Li Xingfei's mother looked at her daughter in silence. Li Xingfei said, "Right now, there's no difference between you and leaving the Taishu Temple. If you really recover your cultivation through Xianmen Tianzong's Tao, your father and I will naturally owe Xianmen Tianzong a favor. Moreover, even without this, your heart belongs to Xianmen Tianzong, so we won't make things difficult for you." Li Xingfei's mother shook her head. She was a little lost in thought. "However, when I entered the White Cloud Mountain to learn, I became a disciple of Taishu. Back then, my Taoist heart was broken. Although it was related to the Tao of our sect, it was also related to us. After that, we left the White Cloud Mountain to live a normal life, not because we were expelled by our sect, but because we wanted to rebuild our Taoist heart. After that, we received instructions to send you to Xianmen Tianzong voluntarily. We wanted to use our useless mortal bodies to contribute to the sect. The sect doesn't owe us anything, so why should we leave?" Li Xingfei's mother looked at Li Xingfei kindly. "Supreme Wang Qing is not heartless. Chenjun, you're loyal to your sect. Aren't your father and I the same?" Li Xingfei nodded and replied, "Yes, mother. I misspoke just now." She had already realized it when she said it. However, her parents were close, so she was worried. Li Xingfei's mother stretched out her hand and gently brushed past Li Xingfei's temples. She tidied her hair and smiled. "Although we have different paths, we still have to admit that your sect is really generous. They take good care of their disciples. They're so considerate that you came to us to inform us first." At this point, she laughed bitterly. "However, your esteemed master and the others, as well as the founding ancestor of your sect, are truly extraordinary people. If they really deduced the way of supreme indifference out of thin air and obtained such tangible results, I still find it hard to believe even now." Li Xingfei's lips curled up slightly. She smiled faintly. "When I cultivated the Dharma of heaven and earth and reached the later stage of yuanying, didn't you also find it hard to believe, mother?" Li Xingfei's mother smiled and shook her head. "That's true. You still have fellow disciples in your sect. Their cultivation speed is so fast that your father and I are amazed. After all, in White Cloud Mountain," she shook her head again as she spoke, "Taishu Temple used to be known as the gathering place of geniuses. There were countless young talents in the sect. Not only were their cultivators outstanding, but their cultivation speed was also very fast, far surpassing other forces in the divine land. Although the number of disciples was limited, each of them was an elite cultivator. Any one of them was enough to amaze people in the outside world. At such a young age, their future was limitless. Now, Taishu Temple was actually far superior to the cultivators of other forces in this aspect. However, its reputation in this aspect had become low and weak. This was because Xianmen Tianzong was even more amazing than Taishu Temple in this aspect. Li Xingfei's mother held Li Xingfei's hand and looked up at the ceiling. She murmured, "Let's leave everything to the elders of the sect to handle. What happens next is not something we can interfere with." Li Xingfei nodded silently sat with her mother. The manner seemed to have regained its peace. When Li Xingfei's father contacted Lin Daohan, who was now the current head of Taishu Temple, after a short silence, Lin Daohan simply said, Since the other party already knows your identity and your daughter is determined, then all the previous arrangements will be abolished. You can live in peace. The monastery will make a decision about the Taoist method later. If it can really help you recover your cultivation, we will naturally not make it difficult for you. After you recover your cultivation, you can return to White Cloud Mountain or follow your daughter to Kunlun Mountain. It's up to you. Even if you go to Kunlun Mountain, the monastery will not make it difficult for you. After ending the communication, Lin Daohan looked up at the sky. Previously, the feedback of the Great Way of Heaven and Earth said that someone had touched the roots of the Supreme Wangqing Dao and the Void Yin Yang Dao. It was really Shenmen Tianzong's doing. What happened next was not known by the Li family. Instead, it was the negotiation between Shenmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple. As for what had happened during this period of time, the two organizations kept it a secret. No outsider knew, but the peak experts of the heaven primal world could all sense that the laws of the world had been constantly trembling in recent days. On Mount Yujing in Kunlun Mountain, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yang Qing, and Li Yuanfang sat opposite each other in the Tower of Scriptures. Li Yuanfang said softly, "Lin Daohan can't be underestimated." Zhu Yi's fingers lightly tapped on the short table, containing a unique rhythm. He and his master Yan Nanlai and his grandmaster Tai Daoist should have the same ideology. They are all extreme conservatives in the internal factions of Taishu Temple. It is not surprising that they have such a reaction. Yang Qing looked at Wang Lin. "Let Tianqi stay with her family for a while longer?" Wang Lin replied, "It depends on her own will. This barrier has been passed. For her, there is no longer any big danger in the road ahead." Yang Qing nodded and said, "That's good. Speaking of which, fourth sister and youngest sister have not come out of seclusion yet?" Li Yuanfang said, "Fourth sister has already succeeded. She is just nourishing the magic treasure. Youngest sister is still a little bit behind." He frowned slightly. "It has exceeded the expected time, but I don't know why." Yang Qing said, "Youngest sister knows her limits. Compared to her and fourth sister, I am more worried that Tianhao may not be able to come back in time, and eldest brother himself. It's okay if others don't come, but if eldest brother can't come, it will be a little." Hearing this, Zhu Yi and Wang Lin also laughed and shook their heads. Li Yuanfang replied with a serious face, "There are still 2 days before the appointed time that eldest brother mentioned. It is not overdue." Chapter 1368. 2 days' time passed by very quickly, and Xiao Yan clearly disappointed Li Yuanfang. When the agreed date arrived, he still did not exit closed-door training. This made Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others somewhat helpless. Yang Qing comforted them and said, "After all, there are 2 groups of people who are secretly holding eldest brother back. The situation is beyond expectations, but it is not unacceptable." Even Li Yuanfang, who had always been serious, nodded when he heard this. He sighed, "There is no problem if eldest senior brother does not come out today, but if he continues to delay, he might not be able to make it in time." Yu Hongyan, who was on the side, said, "According to etiquette, eldest brother does not have to be present, but he and Miss Jin have not seen each other for a long time, and they arranged to meet this time." Yang Qing said, "There are still 10 days, we can still make it." 10 days was specially left to be used in case of similar situations. For cultivators, 10 days was so short that it was almost negligible. Once in meditation, not to mention 10 days, even 10 years or 100 years was nothing. But cultivators who had reached the cultivation level of Yang Qing and the others were extremely precise in their control of time and themselves. If there were no special accidents, or if they changed their minds at the last minute, then being precise to the instant was nothing. If they said that they would be in seclusion for a year, they would be in seclusion for a year, not a day more, not a day less. Even 2 hours, a quarter of an hour, the time it takes for a joss stick to burn, or even the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, there would not be any deviation. As for Luo Qingwu, because of a little accident, even though she came out of seclusion late, she did not exceed the time limit by too much. Very quickly, She came out of seclusion and quietly waited for eldest senior brother Xiao Yan with the other senior brothers. Therefore, 10 days of free time was enough, and for Zhu Yi and the others, if they wanted to rush to a certain place, it would not take too much time. However, Xiao Yan's situation this time seemed to be no small matter. The day was approaching, but there was still no sign of him. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu looked at each other and smiled bitterly. You can head to Longevity City first and make preparations to communicate with the cultivators from the ancient dynasty. Your eldest senior brother and I will be there soon. Lin Feng's voice came into the ears of the disciples at this time. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others heard this and immediately answered together, "Yes, Master." After a short pause, Zhu Yi said, "Master, can 7th junior brother return from the void battlefield?" Lin Feng said, "He will be able to catch up. I think he will be a little later than you, and a little earlier than me and your eldest brother. Then the disciples will prepare to move. Eldest senior brother Fen Tianya's disciples will travel with us." Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others bid farewell to Lin Feng and returned to their respective cave residences. They arranged the people to stay behind and arranged various matters after they left the mountain. Then, they gathered the accompanying disciples and prepared to move together. In Fen Tianya's branch, although Xiao Yan was not there, his disciples already knew what was going to happen next. At this time, they were waiting for Zhu Yi and the others to make arrangements. And after Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others left the mountain, Lin Feng's original body stood up on the Xian Tianbao branch at the peak of Jade Capital Mountain. There was brilliance flickering in his eyes as he silently calculated in his heart. After a short while, his eyelids slightly narrowed and he opened his palm. In the middle of his palm, a dark red talisman light flowed with an extremely ferocious aura. Lin Feng crushed the talisman and a red light appeared in front of him. The red light opened up something that looked like a door in front of Lin Feng. He stepped into it, and purple runes flew out of his eyes, fusing with the dark red door, and gradually extending out a passage. Lin Feng walked in the passageway. Separated by this not too stable passageway, he could faintly see all kinds of devastating calamities and tribulations outside the passageway barrier. This was the Nether Sea, one of the 7 seas of Tianyuan. The Yellow Springs True Water, the Nether Evil Flame, the Mysterious Heaven Calamity Flame, the 9 Underworlds Cold Wind, the Blood River True Water, the Infinite Astral Fiend, and other evil powers filled the world, turning it into a scene of doomsday. The destructive demonic fire, the monstrous flood, and the terrifying storm that swept out of control covered the sky and the earth. It was endless and did not stop for a moment. It made people feel that even the terrifying hell was more peaceful than this place. And in the center of this world, there was a towering red pillar of light. It was like a stabilizing pillar, but it also seemed like the source of all disasters. It was the most dangerous place. Although few people entered the Nether Sea, the scene inside was widely known in the great heaven primordial world. However, if someone who had seen this scene before came in again, they would be shocked and find it hard to believe. Because in the current Nether Sea, although most of the land was still chaotic and filled with disasters, there was a part of the area that was unexpectedly calm. In that area, the Yellow Spring True Water had turned into a long river, flowing silently. The Blood River True Water had turned into a stinking blood ocean, but it was calm and didn't have any ripples. The 9 Underworlds Cold Wind was like a black light floating in the sky. However, it was high up in the sky, leaving a space in front of it that was not disturbed. Underground, the Nether Evil Flame and the mysterious Heavenly Calamity Flame seemed to be in a dormant state. They no longer burned wantonly, destroying or devouring everything they came into contact with. Although the red infinite astral baleful wind continued to roar, the red mist-like demonic wind also seemed gentle at this moment. The Nether Sea was still the same Nether Sea, but at this moment, it had strangely returned to a calm state. It made people feel at peace, but at the same time, it was full of absurdity. It was full of contradictions and abnormalities. In particular, the Nether Sea outside this area was still surging with waves, as if it was the end of the world. However, there seemed to be an invisible barrier that divided the Nether Sea into two parts. Both sides did their own things, as if they were two completely different worlds. One side was sunny and the other side was stormy. The violent Nether Sea seemed to be trying hard to pass through the barrier and turn the peaceful area into its original state, a land of disaster like the other areas. However, the other side was completely unmoved. If one observed carefully, they would even find that this calm situation seemed to be constantly expanding, gradually changing the chaotic areas of the Nether Sea. Seeing this, Lin Feng faintly smiled and continued to stride forward, heading towards the red pillar of light. Silently, the pillar of light stood there. In the Nether Sea, it was difficult to distinguish the four directions, but anyone who saw the red pillar of light would have a feeling that the place where the pillar of light was located was the center of the Nether Sea. However, the space in the Nether Sea was chaotic. Although the position of the red pillar of light seemed clear, most people would never be able to approach it in their lifetime. Lin Feng used the Dharma ritual that he had prepared, and his path was unimpeded. He came near the red pillar of light. Around the pillar of light, there were layers of space, and there were small worlds that looked like bubbles. After entering one of the Nether Sea realms, Lin Feng's vision darkened. He saw that this world was a red chaos. In this red chaos, it was difficult to distinguish the distance between space and space. There was no up or down, and there was no four directions. The flow of time also gave people a strange feeling, as if the past, present, and future were all one. And in this chaos, there was a figure sitting there silently. The place where he resided seemed to be the center of the world. Because of his existence, this dark red world had the concept of space and distance. When it came to this person, time became clear again. The past, present, and future were once again distinct. It was a giant that was 90 feet tall, like a god of fire. He sat on a flame lotus. The lotus was completely formed from flames, and its color constantly changed. Blue-purple, pure gold, milky white, pitch black. There was an indescribable brilliance flickering all over the body of the 90-zhang tall flame god's will. It was dazzling at one moment and dim in the next. It was like a remnant flame in the ashes, flickering between brightness and darkness. It had never been completely extinguished, and there were signs that it would reignite at any time. On the forehead of this god of fire, there was a black and white Tai Chi diagram. Slowly, it rotated in a cycle. His eyes remained closed until Lin Feng called him. Only then did his body tremble slightly, and he opened his eyes. In his eyes, thousands of calamities and tribulations in the netherworld sea surged together. Dark red light burst out from his eyes like a tide. At the same time, the red pillar of light in the center of the netherworld sea suddenly became brighter. As he opened his eyes, the vast area of the netherworld sea that had been calm before suddenly became turbulent. The invisible barrier disappeared, and the originally peaceful calamities and tribulations of the netherworld sea returned to their previous violent state, once again connecting with the other chaotic areas of the netherworld sea as one. This god of fire, the 90 feet tall figure gradually disappeared, turning into a sea of fire. In the sea of fire, a young man wearing a black robe and wearing a purple robe appeared. He had a heroic appearance, and his facial features were exactly the same as the god of fire just now. The young man looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile, "There was a small accident, and I was delayed. Master, please don't laugh at me." Lin Feng looked at the young man, shook his head, and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter to me, but don't be late for your little wife." A warm look appeared in the young man's eyes, and then his face turned bitter. "Maybe. I really have to be a little late." Meanwhile, outside the netherworld sea, in the southern part of the colossal world's divine land, a storm had gathered. Leaders of various forces had gathered here. Even if they were not the absolute leaders, they were still the most important figures in their respective forces. These people now had a common destination, the capital of the ancient dynasty, Longevity City. The ancient emperor's bloodline had recently returned to the divine land after the war between the two worlds. They had established a foothold in the southern border, and then steadily expanded to the surrounding areas. Although the Great Qin and the Great Zhou dynasty were cautious and tried their best to resist, they were still constantly being pressured. After Shi Xingyun's news had spread to the Divine Land, the Great Qin dynasty's situation was slightly better than the Great Zhou dynasty's, but they were also unusually passive. In particular, not long ago, the current ancient emperor of the ancient dynasty, Gu Jun, had completely completed the first tribulation and reached the Dharma-ending realm. This immediately put the Great Qin dynasty and the Great Zhou dynasty under even more pressure. Today, another major event that was related to the ancient dynasty had happened. Chapter 1369. The southern border of the Divine Land had fallen into the hands of the ancient dynasty. The entire Great Swamp of the ancient region was included in the ancient dynasty's territory and was moving towards the southern border of the Great Zhou dynasty. Geographically speaking, the Great Zhou dynasty had been completely cut off from the Songhai sword sect and the reincarnation sect. The two sects were now in the ancient dynasty's territory. The reincarnation sect was still keeping a low profile and biding their time. However, ever since the Dark Lord took over the position of the sect master of the reincarnation sect, he was on good terms with Xianmen Tianzong and respected the ancient dynasty. There were no conflicts between the two parties, and the situation was stable. The sect master of the Songhai sword sect, the sword lord of the Songhai sword sect, finally came out of seclusion after the war between the two worlds and successfully reached the void reunification stage. However, he didn't dare to fight the ancient dynasty head-on. He retreated from the continent and returned to the sea. He was now alone in the sea and didn't set foot on the mainland. However, the Songhai sword sect was more confident in facing the Great Zhou dynasty. The two parties were still close and often communicated with each other, but they were no longer subordinates like before. At the moment, the Void Temple and the Mount Shu sword sect had both sealed their mountains. Although the Buddhist sect was rejuvenated, it was hard to find a spiritual mountain at the moment. After the position of the celestial sect of Xian became more and more aloof, the human cultivation world of the divine continent gradually formed a situation where many other powers were inclined to unite and deal with the ancient dynasty together. Gu Jun and the other leaders of the ancient dynasty seemed to have foreseen this. They were neither arrogant nor rash, and they fought steadily on the Divine Land with ease. In the Divine Land, Xianmen Tianzong's status became more and more aloof, and he was more and more established as a leader. If another war between the two worlds broke out, Xianmen Tianzong would undoubtedly become the leader of the Divine Land in a state of war. Even if it wasn't for the special period of the war between the two worlds, the human cultivators in the Divine Land were also on good terms with Xianmen Tianzong and gradually moved closer to him. However, Xianmen Tianzong did not intervene in the grudges and disputes between human cultivators. However, due to the existence of Xianmen Tianzong, the overall situation was relatively stable. However, there was no doubt about the strength of the ancient dynasty. It was only natural that the other forces would join forces to resist them. The other factions were led by Great Qin and Great Zhou, and the ancient dynasty was also forming alliances with each other. Although the intensity was not high, the situation in the Divine Land could be said to be turbulent. To the ancient dynasty that had the upper hand, as long as they did not make any mistakes, they would be able to maintain their upper hand. Recently, the ancient dynasty's dominant position had been further consolidated. It wasn't an actual increase in strength, but the psychological advantage they had against other sects and forces would be more obvious. In another 3 days, it would be the day that Xianmen Tianzong's first disciple, the city lord of Flame Emperor City, Flame Emperor Xiao Yan, would be engaged to the daughter of the current ancient emperor. Not to mention the person standing behind Xiao Yan, even Xiao Yan himself is an influential figure in the current cultivation world. His influence is not the slightest bit weaker than the current ancient emperor. Although Xiao Yan had been living in seclusion since the war between the two worlds and rarely appeared in the great heaven primordial world, no one dared to look down on him. A year ago, the two sides had set a date. Xianmen Tianzong would arrive in Eternal City in 3 days. Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen would be officially engaged, and the date of the wedding would be set. However, the most eye-catching thing was that not long ago, Xianmen Tianzong suddenly released news that Xiao Yan's teacher, the master of the mysterious gate, Lin Feng, would be personally going to Eternal City. Everyone was shocked by this news. Although the engagement required the appearance of the elders, Xiao Yan's grandfather was still alive. Although his cultivation level was limited, he was still his closest relative. As everyone knew, the master of the mysterious gate, Lin Feng, had not stepped into the world for many years. This time, he actually came personally, which was beyond everyone's expectations. Although they always knew that the master of Xian Gate cared for his direct disciple in every possible way, this kind of situation still made many people guess in their hearts that the reason he went to Longevity City this time was not only for Xiao Yan's engagement, but also for other important matters. Especially this time, when the world was invited to Longevity City to attend the ceremony, which was convened by the celestial sect of Xianmen, it made everyone even more puzzled. However, this kind of unusual action, to them, was not necessarily a bad thing. Everyone wanted to understand Lin Feng's intentions, so they all went to Eternal City. Even the Great Zhou Dynasty, the Great Qin Dynasty, and the Northern Militant Imperial Court, which had a tense relationship with the ancient dynasty, also sent their experts. With Xianmen Tianzong's invitation, they were not afraid that the ancient dynasty would harm them. On the other hand, if Xianmen Tianzong suddenly changed his neutral stance and fully supported the ancient dynasty to unify the divine land, then there would be no need for such trouble. At this moment, in Eternal City, people came and went. Streams of light constantly flashed in the void. The cultivators of the ancient dynasty had their own arrangements to receive the various guests. Facing the cultivators of the Great Zhou and Great Qin, they did not forget their etiquette. Everything was in order. The disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, under the lead of Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others, also arrived at Eternal City early. Their appearance naturally attracted the attention of the cultivators of the other clans. As for Xianmen Tianzong and the others, after the ancient dynasty settled them in their residences, they also dispersed to interact with the cultivators of the various clans who came to attend the ceremony. They were like half a host, but they would not overstep their boundaries and usurp the host's position. This caused Emperor Qin Shi Zongtang, Emperor Zhou Liangqian, Great Chanyu of the Northern Militant Imperial Court, and the others to have some doubts in their hearts. However, they naturally did not show any abnormalities on the surface. Instead, they chatted happily with Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others. Today, not to mention Lin Feng himself, even Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others' reputation and status were also becoming more and more grand, and with the emergence of primordial spirit powerhouses among the disciples under their sects, everyone's status and identity were already different from the past, and they could even talk as equals with the sect leaders of other forces. And among them, the thing that attracted the attention of the other forces was that the first-seat elder of Zhu Yi's Qian Tian Palace, Yang Tai, actually came to Eternal City with Zhu Yi. On the contrary, the first-seat elder of Xiao Yan's Fentianya, Tang Jun, stayed at Yujing Mountain and did not come here. Today's event was a joyous occasion for Xiao Yan. Although the engagement did not necessarily require him to be there, Xianmen Tianzong had previously said that Xiao Yan would be there in person. Now that Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others had arrived, it was naturally impossible for Xiao Yan not to come. And for such a big event, as the first disciple of Xiao Yan, Tang Jun had to run around for his master and welcome the guests. He would not stay at Fentianya like in the past. But this time, Tang Jun stayed at Yujing Mountain. According to the previous news, not only Lin Feng himself, but all of his personal disciples will also come to Longevity City to witness their eldest senior brother's happy occasion. As such, Tang Jun, as one of the leading figures of Xianmen Tianzong's second-generation direct disciples, stayed at Yujing Mountain. His duty was likely to be to stay behind and take charge of the overall situation. If this task was done by Yang Tai, there would be no special meaning. After all, Tang Jun coming to Eternal City to help his master, Xiao Yan, was a matter of course. But now, this task had fallen to Tang Jun. In the eyes of the others in the divine land, it was a signal of extraordinary significance. After Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others, the confirmation of the second-generation successor of Xianmen Tianzong seemed to gradually become clear. The more robust Tang Jun began to take the lead over Yang Tai. Although it was still very far away and no one knew what changes would happen in this long period of time, this signal undoubtedly attracted the attention of many. This naturally included the experts of the ancient dynasty. But they might not be as relaxed as some people thought. Because of the relationship between Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen, the ancient dynasty had a deeper relationship with Xianmen Tianzong, especially with Fen Tianya. On the surface, it seemed that the ascension of Xiao Yan's first disciple, Tang Jun, was more beneficial to the ancient dynasty. It would bring the two parties closer and put more pressure on the Great Qin, Great Zhou, and other forces. But those with foresight could clearly see that the ascension of the strong and robust Tang Jun would not be beneficial to the ancient dynasty in the future in the Divine Land. If Yang Tai was Xiao Yan's disciple and ascended to the position of successor, the ancient dynasty might be happy. The somewhat confusing situation undoubtedly made the other forces, including the ancient dynasty, unable to see through the current situation. In Longevity City, Luo Qingwu smiled and sighed. How could there be so many calculations? It's just because martial nephew Tiansong is more outstanding and more suitable than martial nephew Tiantai. Zhu Yi in front of her did not mind at all when she said this, saying with a smile, "Our sect will not use the method of playing balance like the Taishu Temple did in the past, but Master's prestige as well as our sect's current strength has already determined that even if we do not have the will, we will still imperceptibly affect the judgment and thoughts of other people in the Divine Continent, and affect the overall situation of the Divine Continent. Eldest senior brother and Miss Zhen are in love with each other and should not be mixed with other external factors. But their union is destined to be seen by the outside world as a marriage alliance between our sect and the ancient dynasty. Unless Xianmen Tianzong explicitly denied it, the ancient dynasty's reputation would definitely rise after Xiao Yan's engagement. In the eyes of others, it would also become the force closest to Xianmen Tianzong. Even if the ancient dynasty did not express anything, other forces would unconsciously associate it with the power of Xianmen Tianzong when they faced it. Then, they would feel that it was difficult to fight against it. But when Tang Jun's matter came out, in some people's eyes, many different meanings could be seen, as if there was some kind of hint. Even the ancient dynasty would have some connections. And these things, just like Xiao Yan's engagement, could not be directly verified with Xianmen Tianzong. They could only guess, analyze, and interpret it themselves. But this kind of interpretation was not necessarily the same as Xianmen Tianzong's original intention. Yang Qing smiled bitterly and said, "To a certain extent, this dispels the pressure that eldest senior brother's marriage will bring to other forces. But does it make the matter between eldest senior brother and Miss Zhen simpler or more complicated?" Wang Lin said faintly, "Miss Zhen will definitely not misunderstand, and that is enough. Moreover, her father, Senior Gu, is not an ordinary person. He will most likely understand what is going on." Luo Qingwu shook her head and said, "There is also a mistake in calculating." The senior and junior brothers and sisters looked at each other and sighed together. For a moment, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. For them, it was obviously a very simple matter. Chapter 1370. Liang Qian looked at Yang Tai with a smile. "I haven't had the chance to congratulate you for reaching the Essence Soul realm previously." Yang Tai also replied with a smile, "Your Majesty, you're exaggerating. Your Majesty is only one step away from breaking through. Your Essence Soul is in sight." At this time, Liang Qian was still at the late nascent soul stage. Although the Great Zhou dynasty had recovered in recent years, it was naturally far from its peak. With Yang Tai's current cultivation and status, although it was a bit excessive for the two of them to speak as equals, it was not too much. However, Yang Tai respected Liang Qian because Liang Qian had an extraordinary relationship with his master, Zhu. The two of them had already gotten to know each other when Zhu Yi returned to the Great Zhou dynasty to take the imperial examination during the Golden Elixir period. When Zhu Yi lived in Tianjin City, Liang Qian took care of him. Previously, as the relationship between Xianmen Tianzong and the Great Zhou dynasty worsened, Liang Qian was in a difficult situation facing his father, Liang Pan. Although Liang Pan did not have the intention to make things difficult for him, it was inevitable that Liang Qian was boycotted and monitored in the Great Zhou dynasty at that time. After suffering for many years, when many families joined forces to attack Zhou and Liang Pan fled to Yingxi, Liang Qian finally saw the light. All these years, Liang Qian and Zhu Yi had never broken contact. As the emperor, he worked hard to govern, treated the people well, and was open-minded. He was also quite popular in the Great Zhou dynasty. Therefore, Yang Tai had always been very respectful towards Liang Qian, who was of the same generation as his master. Many times he even treated him as a junior. The Essence Soul realm is indeed not that easy to reach. Liang Qian smiled and shook his head. He was rather calm. When he inherited the throne, he was already at the late stage of yuanying. His cultivation level was even higher than Yang Tai's at that time. However, all these years, he had been stagnant, while Yang Tai had already soared to the sky and attained the primordial soul realm. The encounters he had made him sigh. Xianmen Tianzong's superior Taoist technique resources and Yang Tai's outstanding aptitude and temperament were undoubtedly the main reasons, but they were not the only reason. Liang Qian himself was well aware of this. As the ruler of the Great Zhou dynasty, the resources he could mobilize were actually extremely abundant. Due to the uniqueness of ascending to the throne back then, Liang Qian was not suppressed by the Essence Soul elders of the Great Zhou Empire even though his cultivation level was rather low. Because of Xianmen Tianzong, he was the most suitable candidate to be the Emperor of Zhou. Even if others wanted to make him a mere figurehead, they would have to think twice before doing so. Liang Qian himself wasn't a useless person, and he was very nimble. He quickly balanced the various powers in the imperial court and stabilized his position. Even though his words couldn't be said to carry enormous weight, he had the initiative in his grasp. Many experts of the Great Zhou dynasty who accepted him as the emperor simply gave him their full support, hoping that his cultivation level would become higher and higher. This would naturally be more and more beneficial to the Great Zhou Empire as a whole. Thus, as the Emperor of Zhou, Liang Qian did not lack resources at all. The Taoist techniques that he cultivated, the Taihuang Dermic scriptures, were also extraordinary. He also had some scriptures from Buddhism and heavenly gates. More importantly, as the Emperor of Zhou, he cultivated imperial techniques. With the blessing of the dragon vein qi, he could achieve twice the results with half the effort. Even though his talent couldn't be compared to Yang Tai's, he wasn't mediocre either. It was just that the difficulty of the primordial soul realm far surpassed any previous bottleneck in the process of cultivation. Moreover, on the other hand, cultivating imperial techniques was a double-edged sword. There were pros and cons. With the dragon vein qi, it was beneficial for cultivation. If one could continuously expand one's territory, it would be greatly beneficial to one's cultivation level. However, on the other hand, if one's overall strength was damaged or even reduced, losing one's territory, then for an emperor, cultivation would be like falling into a quagmire and stagnating. If one lost their country, the dragon vein qi would be crippled and one's cultivation level might even regress. Over the past decade or so, the Great Zhou Empire had been facing pressure from the ancient empire. Even though they had been careful and didn't fall into chaos, they had also lost some territory. The emperor's reputation had also declined. This was like shackles that slowed down Liang Qian's progress to the primordial soul realm. Liang Qian looked at Yang Tai and sighed inwardly. The Xianmen Tianzong's direct lineage is indeed extraordinary. The difficulties in the eyes of others are so easy for them. However, looking at the calm and polite young man in front of him, Liang Qian couldn't help but smile inwardly. However, for the ancient empire, it's not something to be happy about that he fell behind in the competition with Tang Jun. As for Tang Jun's colder and more domineering style, Liang Qian wasn't worried. Even if the sky collapsed, the first to fall was not the Great Zhou Empire. Although the Great Zhou Empire had lofty ambitions and wanted to rise strongly, it would definitely be more difficult to face a more domineering leader like Xianmen Tianzong. However, for the current Great Zhou Empire, they had to be down to earth and steadily improve their own strength. Liang Qian believed that it wasn't just him. Emperor Qin Shi Tong, Bei Rong First Chanyu, as well as the leaders of the Heavenly Sword Sect, Songhai Sword Sect, Thunderbolt Sword Sect, and Reincarnation Sect were all happy to see this happen. Getting close to Xianmen Tianzong, following Xianmen Tianzong, or relying on Xianmen Tianzong didn't mean that they would give up on their own development. This wasn't contradictory. If Tang Jun really ascended to the throne in the future, the first people he had to consider were Taishu Temple, Mount Shu Sword Sect, the Ancient Dynasty, and even the demon race of Tianhuang mainland. However, Liang Qian looked at Yang Tai and sighed in his heart. This kid's future is also limitless. Although his cultivation is slightly weaker than Zhou Yunsong and Han Yang, his talent and reputation surpass them. It's a pity that he met that Tang Jun. I wonder if this is the intentional arrangement of the Taoist sect Master, Emperor Yan, and Master Yi? He sized up Yang Tai and saw that the latter's eyes were gentle and clear. He couldn't help but nod to himself. It doesn't matter if he's shrewd or if he really doesn't have any grudges. Anyway, his state of mind isn't messed up at all. It's really rare. After all, although it was still far from the end of the matter, Yang Tai might have missed out on a position that was more important than his, Liang Qian's, position as emperor. Based on the current trend, it was very likely that he would become the most powerful person in the human cultivation world of the divine land in the future. At this moment, on the other side, there were also people looking at Yang Tai. They were two women, one in green and the other in white. The woman in white looked at Yang Tai with a complicated gaze. There was nostalgia, doubt, uneasiness, and even some sadness. The green-clothed woman beside her tugged at the corner of her clothes. "Sister, I heard from father that he's at a disadvantage in the competition with Tao Master Vast Sky." Tang Jun, the woman in white, pursed her lips. Maybe it has something to do with me. I've dragged him down." Hearing this, the woman in green had a bitter expression on her face. She looked at her sister, not knowing what to say. The woman in white was called Gu Qing. She was Xiao Zhener's nephew. After Xiao Zhener and Gu Lianqing, she was the most outstanding rising star of the ancient emperor's bloodline. In the past, she got to know Yang Tai and fell in love with him. As they got along, they gradually got closer, but there seemed to be a layer of distance between them. Although Yang Tai had never mentioned it, Gu Qing understood in her heart that it was because Yang Tai still remembered his lover from the past, the cultivator of the purple firmament path, true monarch Jade Domain, Fang Xiaolon. Although the two of them had been separated for a long time, Fang Xiaolon still had a place in Yang Tai's heart. The ancient emperor was naturally happy to see Gu Qing and Yang Tai become Dao companions. Dao companions were not necessarily husband and wife, but they would definitely accompany each other and help each other along the long path of cultivation. Yang Tai was at a disadvantage in the competition with Tang Jun. When this matter fell into the eyes of the ancient dynasty, it gave rise to other interpretations. Some people's hearts were heavy, thinking that this was a hidden expression of dissatisfaction from the celestial sect of wonders. The woman in green hesitated and said, "But Xianmen Tianzong has always let the matter between you and Yang Tai go. Could it be that because Anton and Flame Emperor have officially established the marriage agreement, they misunderstood that we are placing our bets on both sides? That's why they are interfering with you and Yang Tai?" "I don't know. I only know that I don't have any thoughts about this. Whether senior martial brother Yang is the successor of Xianmen Tianzong or just an ordinary disciple, to me, it doesn't make any difference." Gu Qing looked at Yang Tai with a complicated gaze. The expressions of the two sisters suddenly changed and they looked at their elder sister. "Elder sister, do you think Yang Tai will completely draw a line between him and you in order to reclaim his lost territory and compete for the position of the next disciple of Sect Master?" A hint of pain appeared in Gu Qing's eyes. "He won't. Even if he wants to draw a line between him and you, it won't be to compete for the position of the next disciple of Sect Master, but because..." She sighed softly and turned her head to look into the distance. There was a tall woman in purple standing there. The woman's gaze also fell on Yang Tai. Gu Qing recognized her. She was the disciple of the Purple Heaven Path, true monarch Bihuan, Fang Xiaolan. Fang Xiaolan's gaze stopped on Yang Tai for a moment before she retracted it and turned to leave. A long time after she left, Yang Tai ended his conversation with Liang Qian and watched as Liang Qian left with his entourage. Whether it was Fang Xiaolan or the Gu sisters, their cultivations were all lower than Yang Tai's. Even when Yang Tai was talking to Liang Qian, he could still sense their location and movements. His gaze turned to the place where Fang Xiaolan had disappeared and sighed softly. After that, he turned and walked towards Gu Qing. It's only been a few days since we last met, but your cultivation has improved again. Yang Tai smiled warmly. Gu Qing also smiled. At least I didn't waste my time. She turned to her younger sister and said, "Don't delay the welcoming ceremony. You go first, I'll be there soon." The green-robed woman glanced at Gu Qing with some worry, but after bidding farewell to Yang Tai, she turned and left. Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing and asked curiously, "Do you have something you want to ask me?" Gu Qing stared at him for a moment, then said softly, "Senior apprentice brother Yang, what do you think of our future?" Yang Tai was slightly startled, then his expression turned solemn. He looked at Gu Qing for a moment and seemed to understand what she was thinking. Slowly he said, "Junior apprentice Sister Gu, if you're referring to my sect, you don't have to worry. My sect is not keen on marriage alliances, but the elders will definitely not interfere with the matters of the younger generation's Dao companions as long as both parties are willing. I even have a grand disciple now. When I accepted a disciple, that's what my master taught me. When my disciples accepted disciples, I also taught them the same thing. Senior apprentice uncle and Dao Lord Qin Yi are in the same situation." Chapter 1371. After Yang Tai spoke, a smile appeared on Gu Qing's face, but her gaze was still extremely heavy. She spoke in a light voice, "Senior brother Yang, we have known each other for many years. I'm very clear of your character, and the matter I want to ask you has nothing to do with the profound sect. It only concerns you personally." Yang Tai didn't say anything. Silently, he looked at Gu Qing, waiting for her to finish. "What I want to ask is, what do you think of our future?" Gu Qing repeated her question. This time, Yang Tai fell silent and didn't answer. Gu Qing took a deep breath and said slowly, "Senior brother Yang, although you've never mentioned it before, I know that you almost became Dao companions with the Purple Sky Path's perfected Lord Baihuan. It seems like it wasn't just Dao companions, but a couple like Aunt Jin and Emperor Yen?" Yang Tai nodded slowly and looked at Gu Qing calmly. "That's right." Gu Qing probed. "Was she the one who suggested the two of you separate?" Yang Tai smiled and replied calmly, "Yes, Sister Xiaolan has a strong personality and is very competitive. I'm giving her too much pressure." Upon hearing this, Gu Qing sighed inwardly. For most people, marrying a descendant of the celestial sect of wonders was 100 benefits and no harm. Nowadays, there were countless cultivators from all over the world who were fighting to the death for it. But for some people, the successor of Shenmen Tianzong was too dazzling, and he was getting more and more dazzling. Even Gu Qing herself, as the rising star of the royal bloodline of the ancient dynasty, after becoming Yang Tai's Dao companion, she could foresee that she would be completely enveloped by Yang Tai's radiance from now on. If they really got married, there would be no more perfected Lord Qin Yang, Gu Qing, but only Dao venerate Tian Tai's wife, Madame Yang. But compared to Fang Xiaolan, Gu Qing's personality was more gentle. She was trying hard to convince herself to accept this. Gu Qing looked at Yang Tai and asked in a soft voice, "Senior brother Yang, do you still miss her? I have no interest in investigating your past, your thoughts, and your private affairs. However, this matter is an exception because it also involves me." Gu Qing calmly replied, "No matter what your answer is, I can accept it. I won't be hysterical. No matter what decision you make, I can understand and face it calmly. I'm not a child. If there's really no hope, I can pick it up and let it go. I won't get entangled. But I have to do my best to fight for it. I have to understand that I cannot be muddle-headed." Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing before him. Slowly, he shook his head and said, "No, junior sister Gu, this is indeed something you have the right to know. After becoming acquainted with you, I've often thought about these things in my heart. Even if you didn't ask, I would have told you everything after I sorted out my thoughts." Hearing that, Gu Qing quietly listened to Yang Tai. Yang Tai looked up at the sky and said, "You're right. I've always been thinking about Sister Xiaolon. Back then, I did my best to persuade her to stay and fight for her, but she was determined. I could only respect her decision. Over the years, my cultivation has gradually increased, and I've experienced more and more things. I've gradually become indifferent to many things. Or rather, I can use a different mood to face things and look at things from a different angle. But in the end, I still can't let go of her." Yang Tai's expression was slightly sad, but he was still calm. "Junior Sister Gu, you're very outstanding. You and Sister Xiaolon are both outstanding. Today, I'll say something frivolous. If I can form a bond with you and be with you for the rest of my life, it will also be a blessing for me." Although Gu Qing admired Yang Tai was steady and polite. Frivolity was not fated with him. He never crossed the line, nor did he give any ambiguous hints that would cause Gu Qing to misunderstand. When he interacted with Gu Qing, whether it was him or his master, Shenmen Tianzong, they all saw her as a possible Dao companion. It was far from the point of marriage. Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing and said sincerely, "If we really reach that step in the future, it would be my fortune to be able to marry you. But my feelings for Sister Xiaolon and my feelings for you are ultimately different." Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing's bright eyes. Slowly he said, "You're not anyone's substitute, nor are you anyone's backup. You're unique. If we really get together, I promise to be loyal to you. I won't even have anything to do with Sister Xiaolon. It's just that such a union would be for us to know each other and stay together, not love each other." When Gu Qing heard this, a relaxed and bitter smile appeared on her face. "That's right, I had this feeling from the very start. You've never acted out of line before. Even if I wanted to lie to myself, I couldn't. Although you say that, I know that between us, we will at most stop at the level of Dao companions. If not for the existence of true monarch Bihuan, we might still be fated to be husband and wife. But as you said, even if we're husband and wife, we're still husband and wife, not husband and wife who love each other. I just don't know, if not for that true monarch Bihuan, or if you and I met first, would our feelings be different?" Yang Tai paused for a moment, then continued, "Just now, you asked me how I see the future, but I haven't answered you yet. Because there are some things that I haven't thought through before, and I don't know how to tell you. But today, I realized that I still didn't understand you well enough. Junior Sister Gu, you're far more outstanding than I knew. It's also because you've enlightened me that I've gradually become more resolute about the future." He looked at Gu Qing and said softly, "I'll go see Sister Xiaolon and talk to her one more time. Lying is a kind of harm, and so is rejection. But I still don't want to lie to you. If I've made you unhappy, I'm very sorry. But as a man, I have my own responsibilities. Actually, I'm already very ashamed that you were the one who asked first and not me. I've held you back these past few years." Gu Qing shook her head. "Senior brother Yang, you're too serious. If we're talking about holding you back, it's me who held you back. Because of my existence, you've been in a dilemma. All these years, discussing Tao with you, I've benefited a lot. Almost all of them were one-sided. And when it comes to karma, it's also my own wishful thinking." She raised her head and looked at Yang Tai. "I'm very happy that you can tell me everything clearly today. I'm really very happy." The white-clothed girl smiled. "Senior brother, I wish you and true monarch Bihuan can be reunited and have a good ending." Yang Tai looked at Gu Qing's watery eyes and said softly, "Thank you for your blessings, junior sister Gu." Gu Qing smiled and said, "The seniors and fellow Taoists of the Purple Sky Path should be arranged in the guest house at the south of Longevity City. Senior brother Yang, go quickly." Seeing that she wasn't willing to turn and leave, Yang Tai nodded. "Junior sister Gu, take care." Gu Qing looked at Yang Tai's departing figure and the smile on her face gradually faded. Her eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and she couldn't suppress her sorrow. Yang Tai could clearly sense the fluctuations in her emotions. His gaze revealed traces of pity and pity. Feeling Yang Tai's footsteps gradually slow down, Gu Qing bit her lips. "Don't turn around, don't turn around. If you turn around, I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself and I'll cry in front of you." She couldn't suppress the sorrow in her heart, but Gu Qing only felt her body stiffen. She couldn't suppress it, and she only wanted to look at that purple-clothed youth one more time. Yang Tai's footsteps stopped. He didn't turn around and listen to her motionlessly. Tears finally flowed down Gu Qing's face, but she lowered her head and didn't make a sound. "Junior Sister Gu, I'm sorry." Yang Tai sighed silently and took another step forward. This time, he directly broke through the void and disappeared instantly. "Since I can't give you a promise, the more gentleness I have now, the more hurt I'll be in the future." Maybe if he went to look for Fang Xiaolon, he would still run into a wall and return. However, he couldn't make Gu Qing wait for him because of this. That would be an insult to Gu Qing. In another area of Longevity City, Zhu Yi was currently conversing with Gu Cheng, a Dao integration realm expert from the ancient royal dynasty. Their gazes were intentionally or unintentionally glancing in the same direction. After a glance, they retracted their gazes again. Gu Cheng sighed and said, "Perhaps this is good for both sides." Zhu Yi said, "For such matters, as long as we let nature take its course, it's actually fine. Human feelings are the most delicate things. Although we can make do and slowly get along with each other, making do is a kind of helplessness and compromise in itself." Gu Cheng didn't continue this topic. "I wonder when your master, the master of the Mystic Gate, will arrive?" Zhu Yi answered, "Master will arrive at the same time as eldest senior brother." Gu Qing nodded silently. The ancient royal dynasty actually had some uncertainties about Lin Feng's arrival, the gathering of his personal disciples, and the grand invitation of fellow Taoists from all over the world. This time, apart from the engagement of Xiao Yan and Xiao Zhen, there would also be a Dharma assembly for the younger disciples. Furthermore, there would also be a grand elixir conference jointly organized by Xianmen Tianzong and the ancient royal dynasty. Gu Jun, Gu Cheng, and the others from the ancient royal dynasty were all aware of these matters. However, Lin Feng had informed them in advance that there were other matters to be discussed together. They didn't know the specific contents, so Gu Jun, Gu Cheng, and the others kept guessing in their hearts. As the date approached, more and more people gathered in Lifelong City. Even Shi Tianhao, who was originally in the battlefield in the void, returned from Konghai the day before the ceremony, rushing to Lifelong City. However, what made others concerned was that the person who stirred up the storm back then, the youngest disciple of the Mystic Gate's Master Lin Feng, the controversial son of Yu Huang Tianhai, Grand Luo Yudu, had never appeared. Ever since the matter of entering the sect back then, the Zenith Heaven Immortal sect had never appeared again. There were cultivators who were familiar with the successor of the celestial sect of Xianmen who asked about it indirectly. In the end, it turned out that none of the younger disciples of the celestial sect of Xianmen had seen this ninth Uncle Master. However, after so many years, everyone gradually got used to it. If it wasn't for the fact that the personal disciples of the Mystic Gate's master had come out in full force, the crowd wouldn't have had any hope of seeing the true body of the ninth disciple of the Mystic Gate's master. Compared to Grand Luo, what was truly awkward was that the most important figures of the ceremony, Lin Feng and Xiao Yan, had not appeared until the day of the ceremony. Chapter 1372. The engagement did not necessarily require Lin Feng and Xiao Yan to be present, but now that the momentum had been raised, and they had made it clear before, it was a little awkward at this moment. The contemporary ancient Emperor Gu Jun looked at Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others. Wang Lin's expression did not change at all, while Zhu Yi nodded slightly at him, indicating that he should not be impatient. Gu Jun withdrew his gaze and looked to the other side. There stood a middle-aged man with his hands behind his back. He looked dignified, and his sword was soared into the sky, like a pillar supporting the sky. In fact, among the people present at this moment, other than the curious Lin Feng and Xiao Yan who had not yet arrived, many people had their attention on this middle-aged man. This was because this man was the current sect leader of the Shushan sword sect, Ji Wenrui. His appearance here had truly exceeded the expectations of many people. Even the ancient imperial dynasty was stunned when they received the notification from the celestial sect of wonders. Since the recent war between the two worlds, the Shushan sword sect had once again sealed their mountain. Not to mention the great sword cultivators of the primordial spirit realm, even the younger disciples had shut themselves in. During the war between the two worlds, although neither the Shushan sword sect nor Xianmen Tianzong made it public, the turmoil that broke out in Shushan because of Sword Venerable Firmament and the others was still noticed by others, causing many speculations. After all, at that time, the other 8 major sword sects of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance had directly felt the strange changes in the Nine Heavens Taichu sword formation. Many people even brushed past death, and the sword formations of their respective sects were shaken and almost collapsed. The large amount of sword qi in the sword formations was almost exhausted. After the war, the 8 major sword sects all went to Shushan to ask for an explanation. In the end, there were many theories and speculations about how the Shushan sword sect calmed the situation, and the truth of the turmoil in Shushan was also faintly revealed in front of the world. The enmity between Xianmen Tianzong and the Shushan sword sect was deep. After this incident, their relationship was not said to be even more antagonistic, but it was also very awkward. Since then, the Mount Shu sword sect had kept an even lower profile. After the War of the Two Realms, following Lin Feng's sweeping of the demons with his sword and Luo Qingwu's primary spirit sword becoming famous throughout the world, even though the celestial sect of Xianmen itself was not a sect of the Way of the Sword, but in the cognition of the world, the title of the number 1 holy land of the Way of the Sword in the world had already gradually shifted to the celestial sect of Xianmen. When Hanyang, the second-generation first seat of the Qingwu Pavilion under the sword immortal monarch Luo Qingwu, attained the primordial divinity realm and established the third peerless sword Dao of Xianmen Tianzong, Luo Yuan sword extermination, Xianmen Tianzong had become the destination for sword cultivators in the world. As for the Mount Shu sword sect, its position became awkward, and it was gradually forgotten by the younger generation of cultivators. Today, when they suddenly saw Ji Wenrui, the sect master of the Mount Shu sword sect, appear here, the other cultivators who came to watch the ceremony were all surprised and doubtful. Their intuition told them that this grand event convened by Xianmen Tianzong was even more extraordinary and had a greater impact than they had expected. When swordsman Tong Tian, swordsman Thunderous, swordsman Streaming Light, and other great sword cultivators saw Ji Wenrui appear, although their expressions did not change, their gazes were slightly serious. Unlike the others, Gu Jun, Gu Cheng, and the others all knew that Ji Wenrui appeared here because he was also invited by Xianmen Tianzong. And since Ji Wenrui was willing to come out of the mountain and go to Xianmen Tianzong, who had a relatively awkward relationship with him, perhaps he knew what Lin Feng wanted. But now that things had come to this, it was not good for them to directly ask Ji Wenrui. Fortunately, the ceremony was about to begin. When Lin Feng and Xiao Yan arrived, they would be able to solve the doubts in their hearts. But it was getting closer to noon, and Lin Feng and Xiao Yan still had not arrived. It was inevitable that they would have doubts in their hearts. At this moment, in the void far away from Longevity City, a crack suddenly appeared, and an extremely ferocious power spread out from it. In Longevity City, the group of experts led by Gu Jun all looked at the distant void. In the sky above the huge city, there was a huge and mysterious spirit design operating. It was the South Pole longevity design. The people of the ancient dynasty were very familiar with that ferocious aura. More than 20 years ago, when they were still in the ancient longevity world, they had once fought it at close range. Naturally, they were not unfamiliar with it at this moment, and they could immediately recognize that it was the ferocious will of the calamity of the Nether Sea. Although they did not think that the king of the underworld who had disappeared for many years would come to cause trouble at this moment, and they also knew that apart from the king of the underworld, Xiao Yan of Xianmen Tianzong and Wu Mingqi of Taishu Temple both had the ability to break open the crack in the Nether Sea. The South Pole longevity design was still automatically activated, just in case. However, what happened next made everyone slightly stunned. Although they could see the calamities raging in the cracks of the Netherworld Sea, they did not violently pour down on the vast land of the Divine Prefecture. Although the Nether Sea had cracked open, there seemed to be an invisible barrier that held the calamity in place, preventing it from wantonly destroying it. The dim yellow springs True Water and the blood-red Blood River True Water flowed out from the crack. Although they were constantly purifying or polluting the surrounding spiritual chi, they were not in a mess. Instead, they were neatly intertwined, forming a path. On that path, the bluish-purple netherworld evil flame and the black mysterious heavenly tribulation flame burned, but they were like fierce beasts that were shackled, unable to destroy and devour without restraint. On the contrary, because of the existence of the netherworld evil flame and the mysterious heavenly tribulation flame, the Blood River True Water and the Yellow Springs True Water were frozen. The foul smell of the filthy blood was swallowed by the flames, leaving only a few wisps of faint green smoke. And the dim Yellow Springs Long River, which purified all things and made all things pale, was also restrained. Above the path, the extremely cold Nine Serenities wind, which looked like black rays of light, and the ferocious endless wind, which looked like red light mist, became gentle at this moment. They were like black silk ribbons and red auspicious clouds, contrasting against the path. Whether it was Gu Jun, Gu Cheng, or Ji Wenrui and Shizongtong, when they saw this scene, their pupils shrank slightly. It can actually make the tyrannical Nether Sea so calm? At the end of the road, 2 fire lotuses that occupied an area of more than 1,000 acres bloomed. They were dazzling, bright, and blazing, wiping away the darkness and suppression brought about by the calamity of the Nether Sea, illuminating the world. On the 2 fire lotuses stood 2 figures. They were the master of the celestial sect of wonders, Lin Feng, and his sect leader's disciple, the Flame Emperor, Xiao Yan. The 2 of them stood on the fire lotuses. The fire lotuses moved forward, burning the path formed by the calamity of the Nether Sea. The aura of disaster in the air was cleansed, and then the 2 fire lotuses gradually shrank, falling towards Eternal City. The crack in the distant Nether Sea closed, leaving not a trace, as if it had never existed. Looking at the fire lotus beneath Lin Feng's feet, Shi Zongtong and the others had some understanding. The rumors are true. The person refining the Nether Sea is not the master of the celestial sect of wonders, but his disciple, the Flame Emperor. At that thought, everyone looked at Xiao Yan in a different way. Although Xiao Yan had been moving around the world since he was young, no one had ever dared to look down on him. However, when they saw the scene of Xiao Yan stopping the Nether Sea disaster and descending into the world today, they were even more shocked. Ji Wenrui's eyes moved slightly when he saw that scene. Compared to the war between the 2 worlds back then, he's much more at ease. What level has he reached in refining the Nether Sea today? Everyone looked at the valiant young man in a purple robe in shock. When they turned to look at Lin Feng, who was in front of Xiao Yan, their hearts were in turmoil. The 3 mountains of Yingxi had fallen into Lin Feng's hands, and Lin Feng's 3 clones had been staying in Yingxi all these years. Those who had entered Yingxi previously could faintly feel that the current Yingxi was different from before after entering again in recent years. The faintly discernible feeling seemed unreal, but everyone believed that their feelings were not wrong. There were a total of 6 star sea gates, and 4 of them were in Lin Feng's hands. Although there were demons who could enter and exit the Star Sea, once Lin Feng discovered them, he could forcefully close the other party's Star Sea gate. The current desolate ancient Star Sea had become a paradise for humans. Not only did it produce a large number of resources, but Xianmen Tianzong also allowed other human cultivation forces to select outstanding talents to enter the Star Sea to cultivate. Now, the Nether Sea seemed to be falling into Xianmen Tianzong's control step by step. It was rumored that the spiritual sea was about to reopen, and Xianmen Tianzong was a strong competitor. All of these dazzled everyone. Although they knew that Xianmen Tianzong's current strength was already at the top of the entire divine land, the tip of the iceberg that he inadvertently showed still shocked everyone. They also realized that Xianmen Tianzong was still in a period of rapid growth, and his potential was still incomparably deep. Lin Feng looked at the group of cultivators in front of him, but he was thinking in his heart at the moment, I'm late yet still making such a flashy appearance. Will I be asking for a beating? He shook his head and eliminated the messy thoughts in his mind. He looked at the crowd with a smile and nodded his head in greeting. Such an important ceremony, yet I and my disciple are late. I've made everyone wait for a long time. It's really rude of me. I hope everyone can forgive me. Gu Jun and the others hurriedly returned the greeting. Master of the Mystic Gate, you're too kind. Xiao Yan also took a step forward, cupping his fists and saluting. Some accidents happened while I was in seclusion, thus delaying my seclusion time. I've made my master worry and seniors and fellow Taoists wait for a long time, please forgive me. Gu Jun smiled. It's all right. Although we cultivators are very sensitive to time, accidents happen during the process of cultivation. It's normal. Gu Cheng looked at the sky and also smiled. It's noon soon. The ceremony can be held as scheduled. Lin Feng and Xiao Yan were immediately led to their seats by Gu Cheng, and the host of the ceremony was handed over to the local landlord. Gu Jun sat on the main seat, while Gu Cheng was responsible for hosting the ceremony. Other than the following matters such as the exchange of spells and elixir gathering, this engagement was equivalent to Lin Feng personally paying a visit to his eldest disciple. Even if he had other matters to attend to, Lin Feng personally came to propose marriage. This was enough for any force in the world to solemnly respond. Moreover, whether it was Gu Jun or the entire ancient dynasty, they all valued Xiaozhen very much and cared for her. Naturally, they would not neglect the etiquette. Therefore, the entire ceremony was extremely grand. Of course, Lin Feng would not bring the betrothal gift with him. Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and the others who had arrived earlier would bring it. It was just that now that the ceremony had begun, it was officially entrusted to them. As for Lin Feng's betrothal gift for his eldest disciple, it was even more impossible for it to be shabby. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.